Okay, so we're going to call the meeting to order. This is the Ad hoc Committee on Victory Field Phase 2. This is our 6th meeting, believe it or not. I'm Vinnie Piccirilli, I'm the chair. Tony Palumba is vice chair. If everybody else can go around and introduce themselves.
And Mark Leonard from Youth Sports.
Press the button so the whole thing comes on.
Ann Cordy, a butter.
Elodia Thomas, a butter.
Steve Magoon, Community Development Planning Director and Assistant Town Manager.
Mike Laff, Director of Athletics at the high school.
Pete Santoa, Director of Recreation.
Elliot Friedman, Church Street resident.
Okay, so I have just a couple of comments about tonight. So tonight, I really want us to get all the way through the parking and driveway recommendations. I want to ask everybody to remain focused on that, stay on topic, and keep comments brief so we can try to be done at 9 o'clock. And also, people from the public speak, we just keep it brief so that we don't have to go to 10. Number 2, we have 3 other meeting dates reserved: September 19th, October 3rd, and October 17th. I'd like, because we ran over on some other meetings, I propose on September 19th we cover the stormwater systems, perimeter walls and fences, other equipment, fixtures, landscaping, and amenities. On October 3rd, I propose that we revisit the lighting and look at other elements not identified in the September 2014 proposals. On October 17th, I propose that we re-review the recommendations for all the elements to ensure consistency and unity, and to discuss a draft report to the town council. And then I think we're going to need to schedule at least one additional meeting in November to review and approve the final report to the town council. That's assuming that we stay on track with those other previous 3 meetings. So at some point, not right now, but the committee will look at our calendars and try to pick another meeting for November. The other thing that came up, last meeting we asked Musco Lighting offered to do a demonstration of the lighting, the new LED lighting on a 40-foot lift. Glenn, Howard, and Musco came back and proposed September 14th. And I want to see if that date is okay with the committee. I'll note that sunset on the 14th is at 6:55, so the demonstration would probably be, I assume, 7 to 9 or something like
Is
that.
it just going to be up for one night, maybe?
I would imagine the temporary nature of having a lift with a light and wires on it, that it would only be safe to do it for one night. So, but I would defer to others on that, just because it's going to be, it will tie up some space, and I know the field is being used by different sports groups. So, so the question is, so we could let Glenn and Musco know, is the 14th, September 14th, say 7 to 9, okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just confused. It's for the tennis courts, correct?
Yes.
So how's it tying up field space?
Because it'll probably have to be set up on the grass between the track and the tennis court or something. And, you know, it would have to be combed off, and we need to get extension cords thrown up there. And so we can work out the details about what needs to happen with the Public Works or Recreation Department, but I just want to know if it just let Glenn know so you can go back to Musco and give him the go-ahead. So there's a committee agreement on the 14th? Okay, so the 14th it is. And I'll post that as a
Notify me.
on the Notify Me, so other members of the public, and everybody, of course, is be welcome to come and look at it. So, but just want to get that done. I distributed to everybody all the comments we've received from the last meeting that we've received from the public in 2 separate packages. So I made hard copies to everybody there. So anybody from the public wants to continue to send correspondence to the committee, feel free to do that. We appreciate it, and we will distribute it to everyone. So for tonight, our next agenda item is the parking area and driveway discussion recommendations. I just had a couple of things. For the ease of discussion, I would like to refer to the areas as we have our discussion, as the off of Orchard Street, the front parking area. This area in the back is the rear parking area, and refer to this as the driveway. And I just think it'll help our discussion go forward. I would ask, if you look at the plans, it's actually called Marion Road. I would just like to point out that this is not Marion Road. Marion Road was discontinued as a public way. This is actually part of Parkland, so I would ask everyone, please stop referring to it as Marion Road, because it's not Marion Road. For the existing conditions, what's that? Oh, sorry. Yeah, we'll get back to the minutes, I'm sorry. I see, minutes, thank you for reminding me of that. So, that was my mistake, I got ahead of myself in the notes. Before we talk about the parking existing conditions, the next action item, agenda item was to review the minutes from August 7th. Oh, I'm sorry about that. So I sent the copy around of the August 7th minutes. Did anybody have any additions, corrections, or changes that they wanted to have?
Accept the minutes.
Accept
the minutes.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, back to parking. The existing conditions, there's currently a total of 41 line parking spaces. In the front area, there's 18, 16 regular, 2 handicap. In the rear parking area, along the basketball courts, there's 13, which is 12 regular spaces and 1 handicap space. And then there are 10 spaces behind the field house. There are also 4 unmarked parking spaces on the dirt between the 2 trees near the track. And the 2014 recommendation was to add 28 more line spaces as well as a bus turnaround. Starting, I'd like to maybe start our discussion with the biggest issue, which is the bus turnaround. There's currently no bus turnaround. So for the committee, is one needed? If yes, where would it be located? If no, is there a practical and safe method for a bus to drop off and pick up students at the field house? So that's, if we're okay with everybody, to start with the bus turnaround. And if you look at the original plans from 2014, the plan was to have buses come in and be able to park in front of the field house, go around this island, and return back out to Orchard Street. So that was what was envisioned. There are copies of plans here if you want to take a look at. We have both the existing site and the what was proposed in 2014. So what I would like to do is see if we can get a decision on the bus turnaround. So any thoughts or ideas from the committee? Ellie?
First, to begin with, why are buses, I'm not disputing it, I want to know I'm just curious about the purpose of dropping off equipment, or what is it?
Sure, I was going to actually start with that. I thought it would be a good reference point. What we do with our buses is we have teams that leave from the high school. We also have teams that leave from Victory Field based on equipment. Okay, so many of our teams are in the back parking lot at the high school, but those that can't, for example, football, with all their equipment and gear, kids change in the field house and they come up from there right onto the bus and leave. We have a track program. In the spring, they keep all their track supplies down in those big bins at Victory Field. Same thing, when loading buses, they load a lot of the equipment right onto bus javelins, potentially pole vaults, things like that, poles and stuff. So much of the loading of kids and equipment for those sports is at Victory Field, and where kids change in the field house. Our baseball program, they keep all their equipment there as well. So kids go down, change at the field house, get on the bus and leave. From a home perspective with our buses, The bus will come down the road, stop at the field house, kids will go on, and what we've done is open that gate to allow the buses to continue on.
Marion Street?
Yes, onto Marion Street and leave. That's what we currently do right now. Otherwise, and the reason that this turnaround is brought up is that there's no way for the bus to make an easy turnaround without having to do, move forward, back up, move forward, back up, and it just makes it real stressful. Sometimes it's so bad with parking down there that the buses will actually get down and have to back all the way up to Orchard Street, which to me is a real safety concern with the number of people traveling in that area. And it's going probably almost 300 yards all the way backing up onto Orchard Street. For our visiting teams, we don't allow them to come down. We do the best we can. Peter talks to me all the time. I bring it up at AD's meetings and tell them that they park in the DPW and walk over, and that's what they do. But with bus drivers changing at every AD's meeting, I mentioned it, they set it up, and with new drivers and everything else, people should know by the number of years we've been here now, but they will drive down the roadway, and now all of a sudden we're stuck with trying to guide a bus all the way back with people walking in. And it's very busy there. Sometimes if you've got a track meet going on, the number of people there walking around, it's a real safety concern. So I think the design was the ability for a bus to come down, make the drop off, make the swing around, and go back out. So I think that's a little bit on that.
Okay, Peter.
Thank you, excellent job, Mike. I just want to mention back in 2013, we did meet with police and fire and talked about accessibility issues down there, and I'm glad that we're finally talking about this parking lot, and I will stay on task. When a decision is made to build a facility, as Mike said, there's a lot of different issues. I look at three basic issues with the lack of a bus turnaround. Safety. I don't know how many times that my park rangers or Mike or myself had to back a bus out into Orchard Street. I don't know how many times that buses parked on Orchard Street and it's too big and it's a safety issue. It's a real mess, and it's not practical for our guests. So we try to have them park at the DPW. It's not a bad thing. But it'd be so much easier if buses, whether they're home for pickup or visitors, just come down, turn around, and then come back out. And then maybe park in the DPW or just stay there. I think we really need to look at this, not if there's available space now, but we need to make space, because the bus turnaround is critical, and I'm sure we'll get to the car turnaround and so on and so forth. But right now, buses need to take 10 to 12 turns to turn that bus around. Sometimes people say, go out Marion Road. We try to be a good neighbor. It's not the easiest thing. We don't want to keep traffic going on Marion Road. That's what they do now. But again, I think all buses should be able to go down there. And if you do a simple bus turnaround, it would make it a better facility. It would make it safer and more functional and more practical for use. Thank you.
What's the volume? How many buses are we talking about? Do you have a sense of the volume? Excuse me, what's the volume? You have a sense of how many, what are we dealing with in numbers?
Okay.
And what seasons?
Right, in the fall season, it's pretty much, Peter, you can help me here too, it's pretty much football in the fall season. We have a varsity team which usually has 2 buses going out. We have a JV team. They're opposite, so when the varsity's away, the JV and freshmen are home. But, so, on a given week, we would have 2 buses with the varsity, or 2 buses on the opposite week, say when varsity's away, the freshmen and JV. A week. Football plays once a week. So it'll be 2 buses a week for football. In the spring, we have baseball. That could be potentially 3 buses a week. They play 3 games a week. That's a max of 3 games a week, but there could be 3 buses from baseball going out. It's pretty much varsity and JV that travel on that bus leaving. And then the track would be 2 buses as well. Boys bus and a girls bus leaving Victory Field. And that potentially could be once a week maybe.
And again,
That both spring and fall.
No, the fall buses go out of, cross-country leaves out of the high school.
And council, just as a follow-up, again, and I think a lot of people fail to realize, this facility needs to be built for 25 years. Now, at some point, the town will get to the phase 3, and hopefully, I talked to the girls soccer program today, hopefully we'll have locker rooms for girls soccer, boys soccer, field hockey, track and field, tennis. And so the objective is to have all buses down there. And additionally, in addition to Mike, have the away buses be able to come down and be a good neighbor. And so we have to kind of think not how it is now, but how it should be in a great facility. Thank you.
Tony?
Yeah, I know we're focusing on the bus turnaround. Could you give us a sense of how much of the existing asphalt, how much more spaces needs to be asphalted in order for the turnaround to make the work?
If you guys remember, CDM Smith sent us, which was distributed, the plans with the bus turnaround.
We also created a board that shows a turning radius on the existing conditions plan, if you want to see that.
Yeah, so we've gotten these drawings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, was a car and a bus.
Is that the existing?
Yeah.
So this is the existing, so the proposed distance, right, so the proposed.
So there's, the actual turning radius. Do we have this on a big board?
Right in front of you.
Okay, so in order to do a bus turnaround,
Just one quick second. So on the proposed plan, just so that we have kind of a bit of version control, on the proposed plan, that's this one. This is not accurate because it presumes that the tennis courts have moved down into the corner.
right.
So we should shelve that one because that's not what happened, guys. Because we already have decided that the tennis courts aren't moving down. So this one isn't accurate.
Right. So
Council, we made a recommendation. The only people who are making decisions is the town council. I just want to,
No, there aren't people making decisions in this committee, so just hold that. So what this committee decided
Right.
is, the original plan was to,
Shift everything to the left.
the committee decided to leave the shot put here,
Right.
which means the courts cannot be moved down, which
Right.
means that
That space is not there.
this space is the area where the tennis courts is now.
Basketball.
Sorry, basketball court. This is not possible unless we go back and decide to not put the shot put where it currently is. So
Right.
that's the constraint that we're under.
Right.
So if we were to do that, just hold on. So if we were to do that, then Glenn did this sketch. Glenn did this sketch based on the decision to leave the shot put where it is. How could we put a bus turnaround where the existing basketball court is? And it's, as you can see, it doesn't really work, so. And that, at the end there, so it would have to be, you could put it here, but it would require cutting down the trees and yeah. Okay, hold on a second. So wait, Tony had,
Sure.
did that answer your question?
I'll go along for now.
Yeah.
Okay, so who had, Ellie, okay.
I was wondering if it would be worth looking as an option for just keep the gate being away for people and using Marion Street. We'd have to have a discussion on whether folks on Marion Street would be comfortable with that volume, but I would just like to, I would wonder whether it's just an option that would work so that you could have it, the buses and also not have to move everything. Okay.
Okay, so, Lori.
Nobody on Marion Road has ever been opposed to having the buses come through.
That has always been the arrangement in our mind. We had that gate put in years ago because of the kids speeding through and traffic issues and that kind of thing. But the arrangement has always been a bus pulls up, unloads, the gate is open, they go around, they swing around the block and they go into the DPW. In actuality, that is a lot safer than dealing with this very narrow roadway that we have going between the front parking lot and the back parking lot. Marion Road is wider. It's simple, it's clean, it works for everybody, and at this point, we don't take away more green space from this field to accommodate a turnaround that may be used maybe 6 times in the fall and 6 times in the spring. To me, that's an absolutely ludicrous idea.
Okay, Mike.
I can understand your point on that. I would like to make the point that it's not just a bus turnaround as well. The amount of traffic we have down there has an awful lot of parents dropping kids off of youth programs, people coming down there and they come down looking for parking. There's not enough parking, they drive down and all of a sudden they're stuck down there. We might have 2 or 3 cars trying to back up and everything else. I'm just talking about the safety piece at all in terms, and I understand the piece about the gate being there as well. Right now, our coaches have keys, they open the gate up, let the bus through, then lock the gate as well. But we need to look at it from a safety point. I was at the town hall today with the police department, and we were bringing up the whole issue of buses parking on Orchard Street and everything else. We just have to look at this for the whole thing from safety.
I understand that, Mike. I handed out a form on the table.
Okay.
Well, I just want to, okay.
We're gonna, let's stick with the bus turnaround. We'll talk about the car
Then we'll talk
turnaround
about the cars.
after we make a decision about the bus turnaround. So just so everybody knows that. I want to go back to the bus turnaround. Anybody else have any input or on the bus turnaround? Mark?
So I don't think anybody disputes how bad it is down there. I think it's the capacity just isn't there to support the entire, whether it be the football field, whether it be the tennis courts, whether it be just the casual user. Like for folks that don't have the ability just to walk to Victory, a lot of people will end up driving, right? It's just a fact of life. So I think there's folks that can walk, and then there's folks that certainly park and drive. I think from the concept plan, which I think is what we looked at here, which kind of made me, because I was kind of surprised because all of a sudden we have all of this open space. But the idea is that we shift everything down, right? And so I think the committee has already kind of put the shot put there, right? We're kind of, as we kind of go through it, I'm not adverse to kind of opening that up again. I don't think we can take a step back, but without shifting everything, the practicality of a turnaround doesn't exist, right? I'm sure there's some minimum amount, and I'll defer to people who know more about that. So there's some practicality to not being able to turn around if we leave it as is, right? And I think, as we look at kind of going through the gate and going around,
Plain and simple.
it does strike me as being kind of the most obvious solution, right? Because I think, even as youth sports, and I think across the board, every season, every other week, we get an email that we have to park at Orchard. And so I guess the question would be, and I don't know if it's a question, is not saying that do we limit, but do we reduce the number of parking spots here to accommodate a higher number of folks coming in and say, okay, we're not going to have, was it 43, any that we had? We're not going to have 43, we're going to have, if I look at it, it's 18 plus 2, it's 12 plus 1, and it's 10 behind the field house. We figure out potentially what we could do within the space versus keeping all of the parking spots and then looking at the drive around, because right now there's no way a bus is doing a UE in here, right? Just it's impractical, right? It's not. It's a little. It's deceiving when you look at it, just deceiving it in a bad way, but deceiving in a way where if you look at the proposed, if we had shifted everything down and we had that incremental space, absolutely. But practically speaking, we don't, right? I think right now we don't.
Right. So that's the constraint. We made that decision. So now
We have to work within that decision, right?
We're stuck with this because we've already decided not to do that. So,
Right.
Okay, Tony. Tony, and
I'm
then Peter.
not clear, I'm not clearly, I don't clearly understand that. Are we saying that there's, given the decisions we made earlier about not moving the courts, are we saying there is or isn't enough room to do a turnaround? There's not, so why are we discussing?
Right.
Well, there are alternatives, you know, we could put a bus turnaround further up here,
Oh, up on this side?
which, you know, if we were to
Yeah.
cut down those trees and reduce some of the parking. So there are, so the question, I guess, the question I asked, you know, do we need to have a bus terminal? That's the real question, and if it is, how are we gonna make it happen? Peter?
Deep breath, I'm sorry to be that guy, but unfortunately, I think the way we're posturing these questions, Council, we're kind of minimizing our options. We have to look at this parking situation holistically. We can't start voting on each one separately, because each one impacts the other ones. And again, I'm not going to disagree with the chair, but from what I heard from another town council, that we are making recommendations and we're making decisions, but ultimately, until the gavel goes down in November, then everything can be adjusted. And so we have to look at this, like Mike said, as a parking situation. It's a drop-off situation, it's a car turnaround situation. It's not just, we can't just say no bus and so on and so forth. So I think our posture, in my recommendation, is to either change a little bit and look at, do we need additional parking? Do we need a place for a bus to turn around and go through? Do we need a place for cars to turn around and go through? Instead of drop-offs at the top of the road where cars are parked, you know, backing up into Orchard, do we need a safe place for drop-off? So, I don't know, you know, my posture is look at this holistically in terms of, in addition to just saying, okay, we don't need a bus turnaround. Because in my estimation, the bus turnaround is the least important. If the neighbors at Marion want to open that up, so be it. But I think still we need more parking, a car turnaround, and a drop-off.
Okay,
Thank you.
let's stick with the decision about the bus turnaround. We'll take the other issues, you know, one at a time. So the question, so the options, our options, and I'll open up this comments for the public in just a moment. Our option is to not have a bus turnaround and continue the current practice of the buses going out through Marion Road. That's option one. Option two would be to go back and revisit our decision about the shot put, but of course, as Peter pointed out, everything is connected, so if we do that, we're gonna have to find another place to put the shot put, and currently, there's no place else to put the shot put, so that's, we're in the position of maybe removing a tennis court to achieve that, or removing the basketball court. The third option is to have a bus turnaround in this area, which will eat up some of the open green space. So I think, unless somebody else has a fourth option,
Yep.
the only three options I see, and maybe we should just leave it at that and see if anybody from.
Could I just add to one of them? I think, you know, when you look at just, if we're looking at this space and this footprint, right, we have to certainly maximize the footprint that we have here. Could you not use the space behind the field house as kind of a bus-only spot where they would drive in, they would just reverse, two buses could reverse back in and then offload and then pick up and then out? If we're stuck with the existing footprint, right? If we're stuck with the existing footprint, just right out of the gates, like the idea of shifting everything to the left strikes me as being an inordinately expensive amount of money to do, right? Resurfacing what we have, I guess, is part of it, but if you were to look at kind of the footprint that we have, if buses were to come in the way they come in, they reverse into the space in behind the field house, they load and unload, and then they use Marion. Yeah,
It doesn't take that long to load and unload a bus.
well, we're not talking about 10 buses either. I think
Right,
it's two
so
at a
the
time,
idea
right?
that
So
you
you're
would
trying to
stop
accommodate
right
two.
in front of the field house, unload or load, and then go through the gate on Marion Road, you're done. You want to pull the bus into behind the field house, now you are losing the parking there that you have.
So be it.
So, well, you know,
But that's,
you have to rewrite different
but
things.
that's one of the things that we
Right.
talked about using the DPW yard, right?
I think-
We have to make a decision.
So let me just hold it right there. Does anybody in the public want to make a comment? Just, Ann. And just say the street you live on. For the-
Marion Road, I'm right there next to all of this. So I hear the safety concerns for sure. I mean, I see the kids darting in and out, and I know we're sort of focused on the bus, but I'm wondering if what Mark is suggesting makes more sense to do away with the parking down there, because you're never going to have enough to meet the needs of all the people that want to be down there. And as a neighbor, that is the worst, is the parking lot, because that's where the baseball team hangs out and drinks, that's where the kids hang out and drink year round. If anything was gonna go to make me happy, that would be it. So if you could use that space for a bus turnaround and not allow cars to go down there, would that work?
Thank you.
And then it's safer, because there's no kids and cars in the same spot.
Anybody else? Okay, Steve and then Susan.
Well, I would say what Elodia said. These buses come through, they've never bothered me. It seems so simple. It is true that I have watched a bus turn around and wondered why on earth there isn't someone with a key to let it go through, and I think that might be worth somebody thinking about. But it just has never made sense to me to say you have to have a turnaround when there is this sort of obvious way through. That's all.
Susan.
I was just going to say, if there is discussion about eliminating the parking places behind the field house during the athletic season, I would say keep them there for winter parking for the neighborhood when there's no athletic
Sure.
events.
Okay.
Sense.
Yes.
Hi. I would like to point out.
Wait, just your name and your address.
My name is Lorna Cooper, and I live in Common Street, Watertown. I would like to say that there's a whole group of people that is not being addressed. You're thinking about just the sports teams. That track is used enormously by the general public. Almost everyone's doctor has told them that they should walk there for their health. Now, I walk down to Common Streets, I don't have a problem with parking, but a little parking needs to be left, because there are old people who drive down there, they can't walk a long distance, and they bring their walkers out and walk around. And many people walk, and let me just say that I walk there pretty well 5 days a week, since the year 2000, and so does this lady and this lady.
Lazy lady?
And lady, we're all ladies. And the fact is that I have asked many of them, do you know what's going on with this? And none of them know. And so their voice cannot be heard. And I spoke to this gentleman and voiced my concerns, and he said, well, we should know. Well, the only way you can know is if a mailing goes out with the taxes or the sewer bills, or else there are notices put out where you put out no dogs allowed, no bikes allowed, etc. But one really should consider that it is a community resource and it is used all the time. I usually walk there in the morning, but occasionally I walk there in the evening. There are always people walking there at 5 o'clock in the summer. There are people walking and they're using it. Right, so that the green space itself is important. There's very little green space in Watertown. I believe it has more two-family houses than any other town in Massachusetts, and a huge number of apartments are being built. Green space is needed. You can never have enough room for cars. Leave the few spaces there. The buses should do what that lady says. They only come on Saturdays and a few times a year. And so let's just get this in proportion from everyone in addition to the sports teams.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, just,
Jill?
Jill and then Ron.
Hi, I'm Jill Rose. I also live on Marion Road, and I just want to endorse the current thinking, Mark, your suggestion about building in, because I very much, hear the coaches wanting to have safety with regard to having a turnaround, but, you know, it does de facto work with going down our street. And I also want to say that, in a way, I do wish that we had this phase 3 at least as part of the discussion, because obviously the field house and how it's used and placed is a big part of this. So, you know, this is all interconnected. But I think, you know, this could be a way to go, and I just want to say, you know, it makes sense.
Okay, thanks. Ron?
Ron Trial, I live on Marion Road also. I think we're missing an option that you just touched on. There's no reason to have a turnaround if you open the gate. That goes for cars too. If during a function, you just open the gate, you've got an option, you don't have to have people going back down the road. I am also against any additional parking. I don't have a problem with what's there, but I don't think that's a real good use of space to put additional parking.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Lisa.
Lisa Feldner on Parker Street, and I'm Town Council District B. I'm a little dismayed. I'm sorry I'm not all up to date on this, but I feel like it's really difficult to talk about this, kind of to Mr. Santola's point or others. It's a little piecemeal to me, because, you know, we're looking at the high school, we're phase 3, and so I just think you're putting yourself in a really difficult position trying to make a decision. Well, here's the bus, here's the cars, without little more, I don't know the right word, maybe master planning of, you know, we're not doing this yet, but we know this is coming and this would affect, you know, X affects Y. And so to me, it seems like there should be a discussion or more than one option or plans of how the circulation would be for cars, bikes, buses, pedestrians, and affect the green space. And because it is the athletic field, but yes, Victory Field, I agree, ever since I lived here, use it all the time as a non-athlete, so that's my 2 cents.
Mark?
To touch on what this gentleman said earlier, which was something that I've been thinking about, but it was brought up that Marion Road people were speeding. If you open the gate, put like a speed table, and then close the gate at the end of the evening, you would have that as access for even the people that were parking to get out after an event. So it's for a broader discussion, but I do think that that's an option that could be looked at, because I would not want to see you lose additional parking spaces there, because we don't have enough parking there as it is. So I think that's an option that you may want to discuss, or send it somewhere else for discussion, but I do think that opening the gate, in the worst case scenario, you close the gate again and put a lock on it, if that doesn't work. But I do think that's an option that I don't see any way where you kept the shot put there, you didn't move it, so I don't see any way you can make a turnaround there and make it proper. So I think that an option could be, but you know, maybe the neighbors don't want to do that, but I do think it's something that should be discussed.
Okay. Okay, Patrick?
Patrick Claridor, 20 Marcia Road. I submitted a statement to the online website last week, but I did not see it there today. So
Yeah, I distributed it to the committee, so.
For the sake of the others here, perhaps, if you permit me to read it.
No, we don't have time, Patrick, so.
It's about 3 minutes.
No, sorry. Okay, no, you can't read it, so. I mean, if you want to just, in 25 words or less, summarize it, but we can't have everybody reading pages of the statement.
A proposal for an ecological guideline that would concern both the parking and the bus turnaround issue. That is, no net loss of living open space.
Oh, okay, very good, thank you. Okay, so, really, okay, people have to keep it really brief, okay? 25 words or less. Susan, and then
one question for yourself, Vinny, and for Glenn Howard. Glenn, you said you did about 30 or 40 fields. Were they municipal fields or the university fields? And what is the square footage of this entire area we are talking about here? Does anybody actually know between the parking, the tennis courts, and the basketball, and how much we're trying to fit into the space? Have you done that much in other fields that you've worked on?
So Susan, okay.
That's my question.
Okay, it's 11 acres, okay, unless you have something specific about the bus turnaround.
Well, it is, but do we have this room for bus turnarounds and all the things that you've
That's-
ever done before for a high school, for an athletic field like this?
I'm sure of the question.
So,
Okay, my question is, have you done a high school athletic field with all of this, everything in here with turnarounds, bus turnarounds, basketball courts, shot puts, high jumps?
okay,
and
so
all that?
Susan, sorry. Okay, yes, he has, okay, he has, but it's not relevant to the question of the bus turnaround.
But it's not though.
Okay, Libby, if it's about the bus turnaround.
It's about the bus turnaround. Yeah, basically, I just want to say I completely endorse Patrick Fairbairn's letter. I really encourage everyone to take a look at it. We really should be thinking about no net loss of green space in this valuable park space.
Thank you. All right, so I didn't want to cut people short, but, you know, it's already 45 minutes and we got a lot to cover, so let's go back, close the public input.
Okay,
Hello,
two
yeah.
things. I think we're talking about the bus turnaround, so let's just stick with that. I heard Mark Sideris' suggestion about leaving the gate permanently open. The downside of that is people come flying up Marion Road. It's not going to be a two-way road to go in and out of that connection between the fields. So part of it is truly a safety issue, that you can open the gate on game day to let the buses go through, but that's a whole other discussion. I really just want to say, the bus turnaround does not work here. It's foolish, a waste of space and money. Just go down Marion Road. It's not that much traffic. Nobody on Marion Road has ever been opposed to this. I think we should move on to the next turnaround issue, which we do have a suggestion
Okay,
for.
so committee, the current state is the coaches have keys to let the buses out. So they come in from Orchard Street, they drop kids off, or they pick them up, they go out the gate down Marion Road. If I should ask one question, if that's the current practice, why are all these discussions about buses having to turn around or back up? I don't understand how that could possibly be.
I'll speak to that. I've been here 11 years. I mean, this is the first that I'm hearing that busing going through your neighborhood there is not a problem.
It was stated in 2014, Mike. This was a concocted problem.
Delodia, please.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, one at a time, okay?
All right. If it's not a problem, open the gate. I don't have a problem with the turnaround if we're gonna open the gate and let buses out. I thought it was an inconvenience to the neighborhood. If it's not, that's not a problem.
So if I could just maybe follow Peter, why are buses having to back up to Orchard Street or trying to do three-point turns if they can go out the gate to Marion Road?
The issue, Council, is not so much with the home teams picking up the teams, it's the visitors. So they'll come down, they change buses, so that's what I have an issue. And I'm with Mike, if you keep the gate open, you know, I mean, I would go with Councilor Sedaris. I mean, at some point, opening that up would alleviate a lot of issue with this turnaround. Not the parking, but the turnaround. You know, opening up at 8, close it at 10, put some, again, it just, folks, I'm trying to, one of the things we have to do is allow everybody to talk and everybody to be respectful. We could disagree. I'm listening, I'm hearing two different things, that it's not a big deal to have buses go through. I think it'd be a lot easier for a lot of people if it did go through and it was open at a certain point. Maybe you don't open it for the whole day, but I don't think if you're gonna open it, it should be restricted to buses. I think if you open it up to cars, that would be helpful, but that's not
We're
the
talking
point.
about buses.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Let's stick on the topic.
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna ask the public to stop shouting when other people are talking, okay?
I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm also gonna ask committee members to not speak over other people who are talking, okay? These are basic rules.
Thank you, Council. So
Okay,
I just like the
okay,
bus
so-
turnaround as designed,
Okay.
and
I
that's all I
understand
said.
that. So, but you don't have a problem, okay? My question is, we have a problem with visiting buses. Visiting buses would only come if we're having a home game. If we're having a home game, there would be coaching staff there, and the coaches have keys to the gate. I still don't know why buses are having to back up or do three-point turns to get out.
And again, not to speak for Mike, but if I'm a field hockey coach, I don't want to having to leave my field and pre-game thing and go out and open a bus. I mean, if you had a staff there to open it up, I mean, you could be flexible, Mike, I don't know, you want to chime in?
Okay.
Right. I'll speak to that. It's visiting buses. Our coaches have keys. They come down, pick up our kids. We open the gate. They go out. They close the gate. No issues. It's when visiting teams come. Granted, there are staff there, but like Peter said, if somebody's coaching, I don't have a problem with that as well. I mean, if we were hoping to keep all the visiting teams out of there, but we try and we do everything we can, but it doesn't happen. So all of a sudden you end out a bus and there's nobody there to open the gate, and that's when they start backing up. So I mean, if we can do the same thing there.
So okay, so that's more of an operational issue that, all right, so at this point, eliminating a court does not seem practical. Moving the shot put doesn't seem practical. It sounds like we have a solution in place, so if we have a solution, an operational solution in place where buses can come in, they can drop kids off, pick them up, continue down Marion Road, then do we really need to attempt to build somewhere in here a turnaround for bus? And that's the question I'm going to pose to the committee. So, sorry, Steve.
Well, I'll start by saying I'd like to make a motion. We've already decided that we weren't going to revisit things until the end. So we already decided Shopwood was going to stay where it was, and of course, going to stay where it was. The way the bus turnarounds that Glenn had provided for us with existing, they don't fit. To the extent you squeezed one in there, people would park in that space because it'd be a big asphalted area, and it wouldn't work. So I'd make a motion that, based on the decision we've made to keep the courts where they are, that we not provide a bus turnaround within the complex and continue to refine the process of opening gates whenever buses are there to allow the buses to be Marion Road.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Mark?
So I would agree with Steve. I think that's the right thing to do. I guess just when we look at, and I've spent a lot of time down at Vic, I think people have spent more time down there, where we do the drop-off. You can't get in and out of the parking spots. So just if you were to drop off at the field house, so if you were to drop off at the side of the field house here, I just want to make sure that if we do that, right, and we make that recommendation, that there is the ability for cars to get by, for people to get by. So it's all well and good saying that we will maintain the existing, so if you have two buses parked outside of the field house, right, so if they pull right up, they just pull up at the outside rather than pulling around into the piece behind, everything grinds to a halt, right? So you can't get past, you can't pull in, you're in, it's gridlock, right, until those buses move. At some point, we have to think about the flow, right? Because the idea here, and the only reason I suggested the back here is, and I agree with you, Steve, it would have to be monitored and policed, not literally, metaphorically, that people use it, but you do have to give them time, right? You do have to give them time to get on and off. You do have to give them time. So if you have two buses that will pull right up at the field house, you've got 10 spots or whatever that are run parallel to the basketball court, and you simply can't use them, it's impractical, right? I think that's, and I agree with Lisa, I think this in the context of everything else, but we know that we're focused on this. The only reason I'm suggesting this is it gives you a time to offload on and off. It does reduce the overall number, I get it. But, it is staffed, right? We do have somebody from, I believe, the rec department that's there a significant period of time until 10 o'clock until it's closed. So we're not asking coaches to run off the field, open the gate and run back on, right? There is a town resource that's there that surely if over a particular period of hours would be able to offer up that level of support, right? So we have to think about what's available to us. I think in my mind's eye, as I look at it, there's specific periods that it's open. This notion of 8 to 10 is impractical, right? Because all you're doing is asking for people to use it that, frankly, we're not trying to make it available to everybody. We're trying to alleviate a problem that exists within the facility. I think Mark Sedaris made a great point, whether we bring in some speed limiting or a one-way concept where you can only go out one way. There's a house, I know that my mind's eye doesn't show me what it looks like, but if you're not taking a left turn out of that driveway to drive into, I guess, I don't know who lives there, but if they're here, the practicality of it is you're driving out your driveway, you're taking a right, and then you're off down Marion Road if you want to leave, so.
That's Ann's house.
And I don't know if you take a left and hit the barrier, I doubt you do, seems like a smart lady, if that happens. But I think that's what we have to think about, right, is that I would agree with the motion, but the motion has got to be, how does that happen, right?
Define the operational process of using the gate, I think is what,
Right, would this be a subcommittee one that we would
No,
think about,
I
or
think
no?
so there's two, so I think, one is, we're not, not physically building it. Number two
Right.
is figuring out the operational policy of, okay, buses come in, they're gonna stop, they're gonna load and unload or whatever, and then they're gonna drive out, they're not gonna park there for an hour. So in terms of, the operational policy of what staff are gonna be there, who's gonna unlock the gate, if people are gonna be parked there and they can't get out of the parking spot, because there's a bus there, well, they're gonna have to wait, that's just too bad, that's the way it is. The alternative is if, an operational policy, you could figure out if we know buses are coming, they could cone off all those parking spaces and so nobody can park in them. So, but we don't need to decide that today, we just need to make a recommendation on this motion to not provide a bus turnaround in the complex and refine the operational process of having buses go through the gate.
So I guess
some point in the future.
I guess when does that happen? When do we just add it?
Some point in the future.
All right.
But not not tonight.
Okay.
So if is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
So is everybody in agreement with that recommendation, motion, Steve?
Take a vote?
If you want to take a vote?
I'd like to take a vote.
Okay, I'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Me?
Thank you. Okay, so that takes care of the bus turnaround. The next issue we want to talk about is the turnarounds for cars. There's currently no formal turnaround for cars, but it is possible to make a U-turn at the gate. If you go around the telephone poles in the middle of the parking lot. So the question is, do we need to make a formal turnaround? If yes, how would we locate it? If no, is there a practical and safe method for cars to turn around when they get to that rear parking area when there's no available spot? So this is the safety issue we talk about right now. Right now, people come down. They come down here. All these spots are taken. And right now, people, it is possible to do a U-turn here, or people can do a three-point turn in the space behind the field house. So the question for the committee is, and I think Glenn also did a sketch about the turning radius for an automobile that he had sent us. So the question is, do we need to make a formal turnaround for cars? Do we need to just leave it as is, or what are the alternative options? So that's from a discussion point. I'll have Elodia speak first.
In 2014, when I walked that area with President Sidiris, we looked at that, and one of the issues would be to drop the poles into the ground. Because it's ridiculous that we have all these telephone poles, utility poles taking up all this space. If you drop those poles into the ground, I see Glenn's turnaround, but I also have a resource that's a retired architect who looked at this issue, and we created a very simple turnaround. I think it's important to you all have that in front of you if you take a look at it.
That was Ted Koch who brought
Ted Koch brought this in. I agree with Peter. Miracles do happen. That a turnaround, a simple turnaround there is important for cars. And this would not take up a lot of space. We drop the poles and it would still allow the bus to come up, through, and go through the gate.
Well, it doesn't affect the bus.
It doesn't affect the bus. It gives a simple turnaround. It's a safety precaution. We think it can work.
Okay, so anybody else? Peter?
Thank you, Elodia. Miracles do happen once in a while, thank you. again, I'm sorry to be that guy, but 2 points. The main thing that I'm concerned about is the turnaround and the drop-off we don't have for people. And again, I know it's hard for a lot of people, but I have almost seen 3 or 4 kids being hurt at the top, as a lot of the groups come in and they see a gate and they want to drop off there, and then the cars back up on Orchard Street. So I'm not an engineer, but whatever it is, it needs to be a turnaround, and it'd be great to lose the poles if you can. I think it might be difficult, but obviously it would be a benefit. But you need a designated area. This is the drop-off for everybody at Victory Field, not up top. So a car turnaround at some point and a drop-off clearly marked would be important in my estimation.
Tony?
The diagram that Ted did, are we losing some green space in this diagram? If I look at it correctly?
Partial right next to the tennis court.
The basketball.
The basketball.
And Tony, I think if you look here, that's all paving here.
It's all pretty much paved.
Or it is sort of dirt and grass.
It's right next to an existing tree.
It is a little bit.
And this requires the poles to be taken out?
Well, the pole is still in there, but we'd like to get rid of the poles, period.
I think if you look at Glenn's sketch,
All that was a computer generated.
layout like this. So if you look at Glenn's sketch, and actually if you go down there, so the pole's right there in red. Today you could actually make that with your car. You could make that U-turn if you go around the pole. I think most people are hesitant to do that, to actually go around the pole because it seems like it's a problem. But, you know, we could certainly recommend that that pole be removed. And move it over to the edge of the property line where Marion Road ends. The only thing that's on that pole is actually Verizon telephone wires. It used to be a payphone here. And the Verizon wires came to this pole and then went down to the telephone booth. The telephone booth isn't there anymore, and I'm not sure there's any telephone booths left in Watertown. So moving that pole, I think, is easily accomplished. That allows, you know, actually, I think having a turnaround without actually maybe having to affect the tree or some of that green space there that was shown in Ted's sketch. So that's one option. And I don't know if that speaks to Peter's concern about people getting down there and having to, you know, turn around and go back out to Orchard Street, if that would accomplish that. Elliot?
Just to strengthen the argument for removal of the pole, I assume when we do the work at the field and whatever happens with the driveway, we're going to be moving a lot of dirt, a lot of stuff happening out there, so that burying the wire or maybe even more utility poles shouldn't be a huge cost. I mean, I know there will be a cost. There are different issues about burying a transformer, but it seems to me it would be useful, certainly, to bury the wires and or move it. But certainly, the bottom line is to move the poles to make it the circulation better.
Okay. Tony?
That just, this is a question, I'm not so much on the turnaround, but from the one gate to Orchard Street, has there ever been, is that a two-way area? Can two cars actually fit on that area?
Yeah.
So I would agree that you know, a lot of kids, a lot of team sports, town sports, I should say, use the field, and other people use the field, and I think it would be important for them to have a place to drop off people, and it seems like they could drop off anybody anywhere around the circle. They could drop people off and just keep going, or keep going and then get into one of the existing parking spaces that are there. So I would think that it'd be helpful to have a turnaround that makes it easier for cars, easier for parents, easier for teams.
So I guess just now I'm getting confused, so, can I just, okay, grab this down, thanks. So, basketball court, existing parking spots, field house, the spots, these are the spots behind the field house. So, the last decision we made was the buses were gonna pull up here, drop people off, and then drive by
Through the gate.
through the gate and just out, right? Now we have the drop-off area. To the right of the drop-off area is a parking lot. At 12 o'clock in the drop-off area is an exit to a street. To the left of a parking lot, there's not going to be any space because it looks like it's going to be up against the fence. And it's not really a drop-off, right? It's not really a place where you would go, kids, off you go, direct access to the field. It's, here you go, kids, hop off in the parking lot or hop off in the middle of the street and off you go, right? So it's not, I get that it provides access for the vehicles.
So this isn't really,
This is a turnaround.
it's a turnaround, it's not a drop, it's not a drop.
Rotary.
Right.
It's, so because most people, I think, from an operational standpoint, they're coming down looking for a place to park.
Right.
They get all the way to the end, there's no parking spots, and they gotta turn around and go back to Orchard Street.
Right.
So, right now, they can either do a U-turn around the pole,
Right.
or they can do a three-point turn.
They're better drivers than I going around that pole, by the way. That pole is like pretty tight.
So
to
it's,
the wheelhouse.
you know, and you can do that with, even with cars parked and all the space.
So-
So the question is, if this doesn't, this is not instead of the bus. The buses
Right.
could still come in, stop here, load and
Got it.
unload, and then go out to Marion Road.
Got it.
Only if there's nothing in the circle.
Only if there's nothing in the circle.
But they're not, you know, if they're parked, depends, obviously, if the buses are gonna go all the way to the gate and stop.
Right.
This scheme isn't gonna work, but that's an operational issue that we're gonna
Right.
have to decide how many buses, you know, at a time are actually coming, you know, and from what I've heard, it's, other than the track team loading 2 buses, it's.
Football's two buses.
I see, it seems like there's a lot more
it's only-
buses than that.
It's
though.
only 1 bus at a time, correct?
Football would be 2 buses.
Well, the 2 buses, but,
At a time. Football would be 2 buses at a time, track would be 2 buses at a
right,
time.
but they'd only be blocked off at the time they're loading or unloading,
Right.
and how long does it take for kids to get on and off a school bus, you know, is.
Yeah, just to speak to that point, I don't mean to cut you off here. But just think of the timeliness too. We're trying to get to a game, a 4 o'clock game in Wilmington. So we're down there, out of school at 2:30, we try to get down, get dressed, get on the bus and get out, so we get on 128 before it's a mess.
Yeah,
right.
We're out of there quick.
But that also speaks to the fact of the access for everybody, right? So I agree, I go by and it's a very heavily used area, right? So the idea here is that it's not gonna just line up perfectly because we wanna be out at 2:30. So when I look at this, I see this as being a convenient way to get cars out, right? You know, and frankly, they'll go in, they don't find a spot, they'll go on the circle here and then they'll go out. The other alternative I would suggest is that there is I'll defer to Glenn, but there's a parking spot or a designated turning spot, right? So you pull into it, you reverse out like you would if you had parked. You go in, you go out, and you go out, right?
It's a 3-point turn.
Right.
It's not even a 3-point turn, it's a
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. It
you
would
pull
be a
into a 3-point
3-point
turn.
turn.
Yeah, it would be a 3-point turn, but you go in and you leave and you get out, right? So,
Classic, yeah.
because you
For
think
those
when
who
we,
have 16-year-olds,
when we look,
this is a big issue.
when we look, clearly I wasn't a very good teacher of driving. So, but when we look at this, I feel like moving the pole is one option, but driving down there, and I think we've all done it, right? There's a handicap parking spot at the very end. There it is, right? It's right there. And what happens is you drive down, you see no parking spot, you pull into the handicap parking spot. I think everybody does
You
it.
back in,
You back out, you
and
leave,
go, yeah.
right? Like, let's,
So Mark, so the issue at that point, there's only gonna be a conflict when the buses are parked there and they're loading and unloading. We've already established that, you know, Mike sort of told us how many times, the football games, the baseball games this spring and the track meet. There's not a lot of days when there's actually gonna be buses there. I would even say that if there were 2 buses there, and so 2 things. From an operational standpoint, as Steve mentioned, we can work that out. Maybe we cone off those parking spaces, the buses park there, and we don't allow people to go. You know, worst case to worst, the gate's gonna be open and the staff could direct cars if the buses are in the way to just keep going out Marion Road, and, you know, for the 10 minutes that the bus is parked. I think from an operational standpoint, we can make that work. The question is, you know, do we think having this scheme of a turnaround for cars, you know, in most, you know, essentially it's already there. If we move the pole, it's already there. So I guess the question is, you know, our recommendation would be to formalize that as a turnaround by removing the poles so that the cars can actually take
And proper striping.
and full advantage of doing that. Is that, you know, is that, from a question, is that something the committee is happy with?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess the one question I have with that is, you know, this sketch is based on basically what's existing, and Glenn's turnaround is based on, you know, a modified proposal based on where the original alternative was. So he's shown that with additional paving area and additional parking spots, and, you know, obviously one of the things that turnaround does in Glenn's version is it goes through parking spaces, so that doesn't work. So I'm not sure.
No, I don't think Glenn's, if you look at Glenn's version, you know, it's with the existing condition. And it actually shows the existing parking spaces, so it actually doesn't,
Then that must be another version. The one I was looking at was
No, that-
Glenn's version that had.
that's, well, those were the new parking spaces, so this was the one that he sent over, which is with the existing,
The yellow line is the existing parking limit and roadway.
so essentially it works with the, that one there. That one is a little bit not, it's a little funky, so if you use this one, it's a little bit, it shows it with the existing parking, the existing court. So it looks like there certainly is enough room to accomplish that. And like I said, you can do it today, even with every parking space full. You can go down there, if you make a U-turn around the pole, you can actually make that work with a car. You can't make it work with a bus.
Having a defined center circle will eliminate, I know you mentioned the 3-point turn. 3-point turns, that is what backs everyone up. Because people are doing that. Having a defined center circle will kind of
Flow.
keep the flow going.
Right.
To some degree. And I think you would have to shrink that circle a little bit, but I think having that circle, shrinking the circle, because I think that you need that a little for the buses to get through to that where the gate is. But other than that, I think it would improve people's flow and you'd stop people from doing the 3-point turn and blocking traffic.
Peter?
I just have a question. Are you saying you're gonna put something solid in this middle here?
No, just paint like a little strip.
But you could, if it was small enough that it didn't impact the bus maneuvering, getting through and getting out the gate, why not? What it keeps people from doing is coming in and trying to back up and doing what they're doing now, which is what blocks the flow coming into that parking lot.
It would be, that would be sort of right in the middle of the.
Could just be paint, it could be a raised island, it could be anything. It could be smaller than what's shown on the plan there.
Okay, Ann.
So my comment, I like the idea of the turnaround. I try to avoid this area at all costs. And I don't know if the Marion Road residents realize it, but I feel like a lot of people drop their kids off at the end of Marion Road and probably turn around in Ann Cox's driveway. I know, I see that a lot.
Or park there.
I'm sorry? Or park there? Yes, exactly. And so I was there yesterday, and I was coming in, heading towards the field house. Coming down, there happened to be a bus midway. It wasn't down by the field house, it was by the box office, a little up from that. And it was stopped and it was unloading. There must have been a scrimmage, which is the other thing we haven't mentioned, is that scrimmages do happen and buses are there for that. It was not a big deal, but I did have to stop. I couldn't go around the bus because there were cars coming out the other way. It was not a big deal, it holds it up a little bit, but to Mark's point, if someone's trying to get out, I mean, it's a congested area and that's why I try to avoid it. But I think the turnaround would help. I probably almost hit the pole yesterday, that pole needs to go. And I think it's all logistical and operational. And as long as the Marion Road residents are happy with the buses exiting that way, I'm fine with that, I'm happy. Safety is always gonna be an issue because it's a really congested area.
Did you have a question? Anybody else on the committee? Okay, so then, anybody in the public? Lisa?
Thank you. I was just wondering if you could explain one more time. I'm a little confused about the circulation if the gate is open and the direction potential of Marion Road and what you're talking about.
Well, for cars, the gate will not be open, so
Right, it's only going out.
only for buses to go out. Any other, Ann?
This might be a silly question. I'm just hoping that no bus would be silly enough to try and go around the turnaround. That's not gonna work, right?
No. So let me ask Mike, so there was a bus there yesterday, what, it stopped in the middle of the driveway?
It was, see what Mark had just talked about with the drop off, a lot of time people will pull up to the gate on the turf, stop there, unload there, and then continue on and go down and try to make the turn and come back out or back up. So we had a scrimmage yesterday, so that's probably what that piece was. And the same thing on drop off of going down and coming back out and then maybe stopping and letting people go in so they're not out in the middle of the road to the oval and exiting that way. So those are where the drop offs are. The turnaround is just to keep the flow going.
So this was high school soccer, or what was it?
Soccer was in last night. Yeah, I think we had field hockey in yesterday afternoon, 1 to 4. There was a play day yesterday.
Okay, and just the question of, in terms of when this is a visiting team.
Right.
So who, the process of buses come, who tells them where to go, what to do, or is there a communication problem?
It's not a communication program. The facility is not built. People don't know when they're coming down. Some drop off at the top, some drop off in front of the main gate, some drop off in front of the field house. It's a disaster. And I think we're trying to nickel and dime this thing to make it work, to appease people. We have to create a situation for the next 25 years that's going to be a great situation, so people know when they come down there where they should go. I think it's very frustrating for me to sit here and listen to this, because at some point something's going to happen, and I don't want to have to say I told you so, because it's unsafe.
Well, Peter, even if we had a bus parking area built down here, if buses are still stopping here like it's on and off, that's still a problem. It's not, so building a bus parking area is no good. People aren't just going to do what they want. So to me, that speaks of an operational shortcoming, that we're not managing the facility properly, we're not instructing visiting teams what to do, where to go. So, again, please, could we just, so I think that's really sort of the crux of the problem, because even if there were to be a bus parking area down somewhere else, they haven't gotten that far, so they wouldn't know it. So how do we, why isn't there somebody there? Okay, this is an operational issue, so let's leave that alone. So I guess the question, let me ask if anybody in the public has any questions. Who had their hand up first? I'll take Susan, and then this, okay, Jill. Sure. Good.
Whenever there have been some, games at night, football or big games, I've always seen a police officer that's going to sign the top of Orchard Street that directs the buses or teams down there. So I don't see why you can't have it's a special detail.
Yeah, during football games, actually, the entire parking area is closed off, and the entire parking area becomes just sort of accessible handicap parking. We don't let any cars down there. So, but other than how many home football games? We have 6 a year.
Yeah, 5 or 6 games a year. We do hire police details for those. Tournament games would hire police details if there's going to be a big crowd.
But most, we're talking about sort of the other times other than that. So,
well, just given that you've kind of opened the door a bit about operational, I'm just curious to know what what sort of is the general staffing at the field during the week? So like yesterday was an example of a bus coming in for a scrimmage, so it wasn't a full game. I know you always talk about your rangers, are they sort of on duty, or, might that be something where the council should consider maybe having additional funds so you have adequate staffing, so there are people on a consistent level to help monitor the buses, and also the whole situation with the locking and unlocking the gate?
I think we'll take up operational issues at a later time. We're just trying to, focus on the physical construction part. Somebody else had their hand up.
I had my hand up, but it's operational.
Okay,
So,
okay.
I'll save it.
Okay, Ann.
Just a quick question, when will the operational conversation happen?
After we finalize all the physical construction things, so then we'll take those on. Okay, Dick.
Oh, just one quick thing. If we're gonna start burying poles, I think we need to be very careful because we don't wanna hurt any of the existing drainage system, whatever it is, so we wanna be very careful.
We will take that. Okay, going back, so, committee, do we, have a consensus about what we wanna do here? Which I think would be to remove that telephone pole, or move the telephone pole to the property line and formalize, well, there's actually a street light on it also, so.
Can I just ask a quick question? I guess in the, and I'll defer to the green space map here, is that space that's at the front of the field house just here considered green space in the overall map?
So let's talk about this. If you look at the existing, so this expanded building, if you look at the current building, you'll see there's a black fence in front of it.
Right.
The proposed phase 3, if you look at this here, proposes to extend the front of the building by 20 feet, which would be to that existing fence line. So it would add an additional 20 feet to the front of the building.
So it's not in play.
So that would be, if you would look here, there's like a little green island.
Yeah.
And this is where the fence runs down the middle of it. The building would be extended to that. So the rest of that green space outside the fence line is shown here is remaining.
So the proposed circle is the green, the yellow line rather is the new phase 3, let's call it.
So this is the existing line of the grass right now.
Right.
Is
Okay.
yellow. So this turnaround does not remove any grass. It's entirely within the current paved area.
So I guess the question was, is that in play, right? Because if you have more room, right, it probably makes it easier. But if we feel like that's workable the way it is, just by just moving the pole.
Well, and certainly, we can, if we wanted to take another 4 or 5
Right.
feet of
Okay.
that grass, there's actually a ramp that goes into the gate.
I might just last one for you, and I know this will be my second and only last time I'll ask, and it'll be the third time it is asked, but there is definitely a correlation between what we're talking about here and the operational component. There's not yet, taking them in, and you can close me down on this one, but taking them, you can't agree to saying, okay, we're gonna let everything go through the gate onto Marion, frankly, without saying when, right? Because if you say it is and then we don't do anything, then we don't come up with hours of operation or whatever. If I lived on Marion, would probably say no, right? I'd be like, okay, if you're just gonna open the gate and leave it open from 8 to 10.
No.
Well,
He's not saying it, but he's also saying it, but he's also
Well, just
right?
for this, putting the turnaround here,
Right.
obviously, we wouldn't need to have a turnaround if we're gonna say we're gonna have the gate open to Marion Road all the time.
So
this by implication, this assumes that gate to Marion Road is gonna be closed to automobile traffic. So I guess as long as everybody's clear on that. Tony?
I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I love the, thank you, Ted, for doing this work, and it just seems to me that we are losing some green space, and even though, I just want to be clear about that, that's all. And even though you say it doesn't here, it seems to me that this is the green, this yellow is your green space, we're losing some of it. And I don't know whether it moves as much as.
Well, the car, we could actually, we don't need to have 10 feet of space between cars.
Okay, so I don't want us to go down the road and say we're gonna do this, and then people get upset later on because there's less green space. So we sort of make either we say we're gonna do this, the motion would be to do this without losing green space, or the motion is to accept it with the fact that we are gonna lose a little green space.
I think the amount of green space we're talking about is trivial at this point. So
Okay.
I wouldn't worry about that.
All right.
So, Elliot.
This may be a discussion more for the future, but I would really like to see us examine burying these, eliminating utility poles and burying the wires, specifically, certainly at this location, but it presents different problems that we have to look into. I don't know the feasibility of it, but it certainly seems to be something, given the amount of work that's going to be going into this area, something worth looking at. But for the purposes of this discussion, specifically looking at getting rid of that pole and burying it, and there may be holes and some other issues.
I suggest we just hold that discussion until we talk about the driveway, because most of the poles are along the driveway. Steve?
Two things. One, as somebody who's likely to be part of the people tasked with, okay, now go make it happen. Removing poles and burying lines is not simple and is not cheap. It is not just go take care of it. We looked at doing that in Arsenal Court, a whole host of issues, extremely expensive. I know we did look at this pole before when we were doing Victory Field Phase 1. I don't remember the details, but I remember there was an issue with removing it. So while I certainly would agree that that's something we should look at, I wouldn't assume it's simple, easy, and a foregone conclusion. Having said that, I would make a motion that we accept the proposal to have a car turnaround with the assumption of removing the existing pole and providing some indication for a circle at this end of the driveway or parking area, or however you want to phrase it.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion, any further discussion, I should say? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm just gonna oppose it,
I'm just going to oppose it. I mean, I like basically the concept, but I just oppose it because I think it's just putting a Band-Aid on a situation we need to, so I'm going to oppose it. So thank you.
Okay. It's 8:25. So the next issue is, we all know there's not adequate parking for every Victory Field event. So the question is there adequate parking at other times except for large events like football games, graduation, the 4th of July celebration, the Relay for Life, etc. So I think as long as we're all in agreement that we could never have enough parking for every event held at Victory Field, that's not our design criteria. So the question is there adequate parking at all other times except for large events? And should we add parking spaces or remove parking spaces? So that's, so now we move on to the parking space element. So that's sort of a different charge. And we know that most of the time, you drive by Victory Field, there's plenty of empty spaces. So the question is, should we add parking spaces or remove parking spaces? And I go back to what the current spaces are. We have basically 41 line spaces and 4 spaces on the dirt between the 2 trees. The 2004 recommendation was to add 28 more spaces to 41. So the question is, what do we, and there were some calls to remove parking spaces. So do we want to keep the number of parking spaces as is? Do we want to add some more parking spaces, or do we want to remove parking spaces? And that's a question for us to consider. Who would want to speak first on that? Steve.
Well, I would agree with your assumption that we're never gonna have enough parking for big events. I think the parking is there serves two purposes. Obviously the smaller ongoing day-to-day things, as well as winter parking for the neighborhood. And in that context, I think it makes sense to do two things. One, to clean up and formalize the existing paved areas. And I think to the extent we can, we should add parking within that area, outside, obviously, where we just talked about a turnaround. And I would put that back to Glenn to say, based on the decisions that we've made to date, it doesn't make sense. Are there places where we could add a few more spaces or not?
And I would just add to that, the 4 informal spots on the dirt could perhaps be turned into 4 formal parking spaces. So I think that would help. But I don't know, if we could squeeze, I guess it's going to be hard to, without doing engineering drawings tonight, to figure out if we could squeeze 1 or 2 extra spaces in there. But is that an issue? So Elliot and then Tom.
These are questions for Glenn. These are questions. Here we go. They were questions for Glenn. What is the, on the existing spaces, how much square footage are we, what do they use? 290, 310?
Well, the ones we put in at the front, I think were 9 by 18. That's the minimum size you would put in for a parking space. 10 by 20 is preferred, but not necessary.
Yeah.
And I think
They would meet our standard design.
Is
It's
it-
not
is it-
compact, but.
Is that what we have now?
that's what we designed under phase 1 at the front.
Okay.
What's back there now is ill-defined without an edge, so.
Do you gain anything either in numbers or in safety if it's angled somewhat? Essentially, they're perpendicular. Is that a?
I don't think you would gain any spaces. You might actually lose them trying to go perpendicular in this scenario.
Okay.
You would probably lose them. The only time angled spaces is advantageous is when it's too narrow to fit in perpendicular spaces. You don't gain added spaces unless it's too narrow.
Okay.
Okay. Peter or Tom?
In the recommendation was 28 more legitimate spots. Where was those in the original proposal?
That was.
Basketball courts,
yeah.
So basically where the basketball
Thank
court
you.
is currently today.
Thank you.
Okay, Peter?
She was first.
No, you're
I like going last one.
All right,
Oh, okay.
and sorry.
I would be inclined to not lose any spaces. I think it's a funny question because for most of us who are abutters or live in the neighborhood, parking's not really an issue except if you're using it during winter parking. I think it's more an issue for the general public, people who are driving from across town, et cetera. So I would want to hear from that group to see what they think about more parking or less parking. But I wouldn't be inclined to go less.
Good, thank you. I think that was somebody from the public who made that point there. Peter?
Thank you, and I'm in full agreement. We're not talking about a football game. We're not talking about Relay for Life. We're not talking about a big event. We're talking about general day-to-day. And I'm very frustrated because I think we're making some, assumptions. I don't think on a general day, especially if you go down there during the academic year, that there's enough parking. On a daily basis during the week, you're going to see the track being used. You're going to see some of the tennis courts being used, the basketball court, and both fields. And if you talk to people down there, there's just not enough parking. We need to add capacity. Now, we put 28 spots. We don't need 28 spots. I would concur. Obviously, my feeling is I think we really need to do the initial design, but that's not the question here. But we need to have additional parking, and I disagree that we have enough parking now. I would ask people to go down there during the day and just see what a mess it is, between the turnaround, between the parking, and then people yelling at me because there's not enough, you know, Pete, when are you gonna put enough parking down here? So I think people gotta go down there and see it. The other thing, and benefit to the neighborhood, the off-street parking situation, I think could be a great resource if it was more formalized. I think we did, phase one up top there is pretty formalized, but down below, it's really, especially around the basketball court across from the field house, it's kind of a mess. If we added 15 spots, great, but we need to add something, because I think, you know, it's making it very uncomfortable. People go down there, and people are very upset when they're down there, and when I'm down there, they take it out on me, but thank you.
We'll never have enough parking. People, you know, I call it the lazy bum parking spaces. Everybody wants to park as close as possible to where we're going, and that's the issue. The idea is this is a recreational area. There's parking on Orchard Street. There's parking at the DPW. People park on Marion Road. If you need, if you're talking about older people that need the convenience of parking, put in some more handicap spaces if that's necessary. But for the rest of it, I just think people walk a few feet, a few blocks, it's no big deal. And all of us endure this. We all bought our houses around a park, sports field area, not a sports complex, mind you, but we know that this comes with the territory. And nobody's objecting to anything except when you block our walkways. When I was in a wheelchair for 3 months, I did not appreciate idiots that I have no sidewalk, so I had idiots that parked right up across my front walk. I couldn't even get out of my house. But again, this is setting a tone for the neighborhood and for the use of this facility. And I think we're upgrading. We need a different kind of signage. We need a different kind of education in this community of what this means to have this very nice setting for sports. And we start there. A lot of this is operational, believe me. I don't think we need to go down the road that we have to have a blinking sign at the end of Orchard Street like you do in a parking lot at Assembly Square Mall, blinking at you, there are 5 spaces left. There are other places where they have a so-called service corps in high schools, where kids become part of this service corps. They are trained and they are affiliated with sports teams as assistants so that when this stuff is going on, they could be there to help monitor the gate, the parking situation, have a key to let the buses through. There's so many creative things that we can do. We are mired in the weeds around these issues, and I would like us to think in a broader perspective. Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else in the grid, Mike? Okay, so we'll have some from the public. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my name is Catherine Wolf. I live on Sunnybank Road. And the August 17th Watertown Ma had a letter from our Channing Road residents which traced the history of this park. And of course, it was originally farmland.
That was from Dick.
Dick O'Connor, right there to your right. Dick,
Oh,
raise your hand.
Well, that was a terrific letter. I just thought it was a terrific letter. And the use of, when the family home farmer inherited the land, the use was to be for the people of Watertown for passive recreation. And I think we're kind of ignoring the history when we jazz it up with all this paving and all that. And I think also, last time I was at a meeting here, you mentioned Philipello Park and somebody said it's in Brighton. I don't think it's in Brighton. I think it could be used more.
Okay, I'll take Dick O'Connor.
Thank you. It seems to me the more parking spaces we have, the more cars we're going to have in there, which increases the snarl of traffic at busy times. So I think that's just going to exacerbate the problem that was mentioned. And there's 2 other negative consequences that I can think of. Because the closer you move the cars to the basketball court and the tennis courts, the less safe it is in that area. And the other thing that I'm thinking of, the more spaces there are, the more temptation will be for people to hang out there in the middle of the night, which could conceivably cause other problems. So I say, these are playing fields. Put grass in there and let the kids play there.
Yep.
My name is David Meshulam. I live on Oliver Street. I ran a program this summer with a group of teens
where we looked at trees around Watertown, and one of the spaces that we spent a lot of time in was the Victory Field area, where there are some beautiful trees that are decades old, and a lot of the teams really connected to those spaces. So I'm speaking on behalf of the teams. I invited some of them today, but I wanted to share with you that they spend a lot of time there, and they're not your athletic teams. They're your teams who are hanging out in Victory Field as a space where they can connect with each other and they can connect with nature. So I'm speaking on behalf of them, but I'm also speaking on behalf as a father of 2 young kids. We use this park a lot. We have the privilege of being able to walk to the park. And we also, I have 2 young daughters, they're 8 and 10. We have to walk through that parking lot that abuts Marion. We walk through the gate, and there are lots of cars that are backing up there. So I humbly request that we think about removing parking spots for 2 reasons. First, a cultural reason. We recognize that we live in a culture right now where I'm sitting here for the past hour and a half, and all I hear about is cars. We're not talking about people. It's people that we need to focus on. It's people that are using this facility. You put in that turnaround, people recognize that it's not a place to park, it's a place to drop people off and then continue on your way. This is not a place for parking. This is a place for play. So if we can start shifting our discourse and our language away from cars and towards people, I will consider that a victory for us as a community. Second, to your point, thinking 25 years ahead. 25 years from now, a future not too far away, we will not be driving our cars. There will be autonomous vehicles who will take us, place us, drop us off, and continue on their merry way. This is not at all in jest. This is our future. Cars will no longer be parking in Victory Field in 25 years. This is true. This is going to happen. This is going to transform urban spaces. So if we're serious about the future in 25 years of Watertown, I suggest we think about how we make these spaces green, how we make these spaces accessible to humans, and how we start thinking of a future without cars.
I think Ann Assis and then Ann Cox.
I was just gonna say, thank you for saying it, and I completely agree.
Okay, thank you. Ann Cox.
I completely agree with what he just said, and also I think we should keep in mind that a lot of kids walk to and from school that way. And because that's where I walk to and from school, because I happen to work at Lowell as well. So I also see the danger after school of kids coming to park or kids driving up and down and young kids scootering around or doing whatever it is they're doing. So if we're really concerned about the safety of the kids, I think we need to go to less parking down there, not more. I understand the handicap spaces for sure should stay. Maybe we should have more of those. But if we're really concerned with the safety, it should be less parking down there, not more.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Marilyn. I live on Lovell Road, and I walk at the track frequently, and I never have a problem with parking. There's plenty of parking most of the time there.
Thank you.
So I'm against paving one more inch of water
Okay. So that's it. All right, so let's go back to the committee. Elodia and then Mark.
Well, many requests, I've had many requests for better bike racks and better locations for bike racks. I'm glad somebody in the audience brought this up, because I too have had requests to say, these are 2 fields. This is a recreation space. Connect these spaces together so kids can move freely without worrying about cars across these spaces, rather than continuing to focus on the damn cars coming in and out. So, you know, I echo what is being said here. I mean, it's a recreation space and there's parking around the area. There's parking at the Lowell. So maybe we need to really rethink that from a global perspective and say, how many parking spaces are at the Lowell? How many are accessible at DPW? How many are at Orchard? Do we make a specific drop-off space on Orchard for the buses? Would that be a better way to go than even talking about bringing them in to the park area? I don't know, but these are suggestions that have been put forth to me. You know, I think it's a complicated issue, but I agree totally with David and Patrick Fairbairn and many other people who have said in 10, even 15 years, we won't be talking about cars at Victory Field. Why are we planning for the past and not for the future?
Martha, you have
Yeah, I guess it's more of a practical question for Old Glen, who's had to sit through all these two, is where is the pedestrian way when we look at kind of the parking lot? Where do you walk? Like, so if this is the plan, right? I think then this is kind of where we are, right? This yellow one here with moving the red dot when we move the pole.
Right.
Where are we walking here? How do we?
Right now, I think somebody brought up at the last meeting that that whole space between the courts and the track is kind of a free-for-all, and it's always mud because there is no well-defined pedestrian pathway.
No, but I mean, so if I live on Marion and I'm walking to the Lowell School, right? There isn't a sidewalk today that gets me from Marion to the Lowell School, and I'm walking through a parking lot, right? So.
Let's,
No, but hold on a second, we can't table everything.
But that's, when we talk about the driveway and the pedestrian circulation, I think that's the next thing we want to talk about after.
But if we agree that this is, there's chicken and egg here, right? It's kind of, you have to, if you're gonna say that this is what we're gonna do, we agree to the way this looks, and then we add pedestrian way to it, it may be impractical, right? You know, when we think about the turnaround, it's not leaving any space right now. It may not work if you have to pedestrianize the way through, right?
I think you could put a sidewalk along the basketball court and then along the parking spaces.
But you can't if you were to do this, right? So if you look at this, and this is why I'm saying if you take a serial approach.
Well, we're not doing that, so that's.
All right, but if
we're going to do this. So let me just, if I can just make one observation. Anybody who goes down there, you know, sees that the driveway is the walkway.
Right.
People just use that as the pedestrians, because this is a park, it's not a street. You know, pedestrians feel they have the right to use it. And just, if we could maybe just think about, maybe just, you know, I don't want to, you know, but we need to sort of break this down into chunks, otherwise we're going to be here for 4 or 5 hours. But, you know, let's talk about the driveway and pedestrian circulation next. But let's just, can we answer the question? Do we need to, you know, do we have enough spaces in that rear parking lot as there are today? Do we want to add more, or do we want to remove some? So that's we heard from Peter, he'd like to add 15. We've heard, you know, some calls that, you know, we need some parking there. What do we want to do? We heard from Steve that, you know, formalize those 4 informal parking spaces. So we have a range of things. What do we want to do, Tony?
I would make the motion to use this as use the motion for a discussion that we leave the spots as is, but the 41 spots that are there, and that we leave that as is, and maybe not use the 4 dirt road spots, but use that, should see if we can fix that up a little bit to make more green space or not. But so that we just keep the 41 spots, clean it up a little bit, mark them clearly that they're spots, and not use the 4 on the dirt, the 4 spots on the dirt between the trees.
Okay, so that's a motion from Tony.
I haven't had a second, so.
I second that, totally.
Okay, any discussion? So the motion.
I've heard from people again and again, we've lost, 20,000 some odd square feet of green space within the oval, given everything that's going on, and the idea that we would redeem some of that space by eliminating that space that Tony is talking about, I think is a very good idea. Any green space that we can bring back into the picture is important, and I have some suggestions on this walkway idea, but I'll keep my mouth shut until we get there.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Mike?
Yeah, I'm dealing with, I understand where we're heading to the future and 25 years down the road. I'm dealing with day to day right now, and I think we need to look at, there's an awful lot of people to come to that complex. There are people coming from outside of town, they don't live in the area, they can't walk from their houses here. I think we need to look at, if we don't deal with it somehow, we're not talking about an awful lot of spaces here, we don't have the ability to do that. But it's gotta impact the neighborhood. If they're not parking there, where are they parking? I mean, we can talk about the DPW, we try to get people to go in there. I'm just concerned about where people are gonna go and impacting the neighborhood. They're gonna be in front of driveways, that's what I think.
Can I ask Mike a question?
Sure.
Mike, I'm just trying to understand what you mean when you say you have people coming from outside the neighborhood.
Well, I mean, meaning we have a game.
Right.
We have a game day, we have people coming from Wilmington. Okay, they drive there, and they have to park there. They have to park somewhere. Okay?
What about the Lowell School? It's right up the hill, it's a parking lot.
I mean.
It's operational, again, we're talking operations.
Right, well, if you've been down there, Peter deals with people in terms of trying to get people to move and stuff. It's not an easy thing.
No, I understand that, but I think we can
Where
work
they'll
out
park
the
is in front of Ian Cox's house and driveway. That's because that's the we just said that. It's
They
the,
park in front of my house,
Right.
I'm close too, but it's for 2 hours, it's for a game.
Right.
You know, it's not permanent, and I think we're trying to balance these things out.
right, I mean, we have an awful lot of events down there. When we just talked about buses going here and there, but we do have an awful lot of events. We have home track meets, we have middle school track. There's pretty good numbers on those. Parents come to see their kids. I'm just looking at the neighborhood piece as well.
Okay, I am sorry, I know I'm not supposed to speak out, but he said my name, so I feel like I'm getting a little offended here. I would much rather have somebody park in front of my house for 2 or 3 hours than have more parking spaces for people to hang out in the middle of the night.
Yes.
I have no problem with people parking in front of my house, none at all.
Yes.
Me too.
So I just want that, because I think that was a conception or a misconception that was passed on to Glenn, was that it was the abutters that wanted more parking spaces, and that's further.
Okay. So to restate, keeping, the Tony's motion was to keep, the
41 spaces.
41 spaces as is. And
Reclaim the dirt.
and remove the temporary parking of the 4 spaces on the dirt between the trees. So is that, and again, if we're looking at, anybody else have any feelings on that? Steve?
I already told you my opinion when we started. Again, I think it makes sense for the variety of users, and again, I don't think we're talking about a delta of a lot of spaces. I don't think Glenn's gonna be able to fit in probably more than 4 or 5 spaces anyway, but I still think it makes sense to provide those, so that's where I am.
And again, just in the rear parking lot, we're talking about 23 spaces. Right. At the rear parking area, so the 41 is total to
Yeah, the
18 in the
41,
front.
yes.
So, so that's, so leave it as it is with the 20, so Tony's motion was to leave it with the 23, and don't add any additional spaces. Anybody else on the committee?
I'm sorry.
I'm
Yeah,
confused.
23, where is that?
He just looked.
There's 23 spaces in the rear parking area.
There's 23 in the rear?
Yeah.
Oh, I had 10 behind the field house.
There's 10 behind the field house
Oh, okay,
and
all right.
13 along the basketball
Okay, all
court.
right, got it.
So there's 23 spaces there. So Tony's recommendation would be not to formalize the 4 informal spaces.
It's also much better for those trees.
Do we want to,
I just had a
David.
clarifying question for Tony. Tony, are you saying not to formalize them, or are you saying to claim them back? Because those are two
to
separate.
claim them back? It's
Yeah,
to return them to green space.
right, okay.
Is I think what the intention was, is to remove them as part of the space.
Yes.
Council, I'm sorry, initially you had 3 questions. Do you add, take away, or keep the same amount? Now we're doing something different.
No, we're just keeping the same amount,
We're keeping the same amount.
which is 23.
Okay, so then I just think take a vote and people are pretty clear with how they feel, just have people take a vote and that's all. I'm not, I mean, that
Okay,
area, yeah, that's all.
I just didn't know if anybody had any, so, okay, so that's the motion to leave it with 23 spaces in the rear parking area. And reclaim those 4 dirt spaces as green space. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so this,
6-3.
so that's one of the more, okay. Let me just write this down. All right, so that's that. Let's,
Could you give us a tally of how that? the
With a
vote
6 to
felt?
3.
6 to 3.
passed by 6 to 3.
Thank you.
So the question that we keep coming back to is, and we got many emails on this question, is how do we provide appropriate pedestrian access through the driveway from Orchard Street all the way back to the gate of Marion Road? Do we need sidewalks with curbs? Do we need raised table crosswalks? Or do we need some other solution? And if you look at the original plan, right now there's, everybody just walks through the driveway as sort of a sidewalk. There is no sidewalk. What the plan had envisioned was two concrete pads to take you from this area with a sidewalk and 2 raised table crosswalks at this area with the pedestrians from this area crossing the field here. Here you could go into the multi-use field. Here actually it wouldn't, this raised crosswalk doesn't go anywhere, it just dead ends at the other end of the parking lot, so it's not very useful.
There is a gate that goes into some structure over there.
Yeah, that's the gate that goes to the elevator.
Which someday we were hoping was gonna be.
But it's the public, that's not a public access
public
point,
access.
so. So that's what sort of was proposed. We heard from a lot of people talking about we should put sidewalks through this area so people can walk on sidewalks. Glenn, just your, I'm gonna throw that out there. And again, the driveway, we're not gonna call it Marion Road, we're calling it a driveway. And I just wanna get Glenn's, now that you've had to have 3 years to sit on this and think about it, what your new thoughts would be.
Problem with that existing driveway is that it's too narrow as it is, so if we'd like to see 24 feet wide for actual 2-way traffic through there, that's less, at the narrowest point it's 20 feet. I think it goes 22 long. There's not enough space to put a sidewalk between that track and that roadway and maintain the width of that roadway, so that was, it's why we had these different connections. In some cases, people would have, when there's not a track meet, people would come across and walk to get to the other side of the track if they wanted to stay off the roadway, the driveway. But the driveway width as it is inadequate.
Okay.
Too bad a sidewalk.
Okay, Tony and then Elliot.
Yeah, I'm not sure we need a sidewalk. It seems to me that if we have some cars going down to these parking spaces, the 23, I assume people are cautious, or at least they don't speed down this because it is tight already. It seems to me that we would be taking away space that we could just use as green space, and have people walk on the street when they need to walk on the street, or walk on the roadway, I should call it. It's not a street, on the roadway. I think it's not good use of space or good use of money to put a sidewalk in.
Okay, thank you. Elliot.
A couple of things. One, if you go to Orchard Street, right at the entrance, you see there's some space right to the left of the entrance where what are those trees? They're the crabapple, Glenn, right at the or whatever they are.
In this triangle right
I think you need a pedestrian way. Let's take it in segments. One, I think you might think about having a pedestrian access from Orchard Street just to the left of the entrance, going down to the track, and it wouldn't, you would keep whatever you have in the driveway. I think you need that because you can have the car, some of the buses, if you can convince them, they could offload on Orchard Street, and then those kids could go directly down to the track. What I'm saying is that you would have access.
On this side?
Yeah, you got, the entranceway is a little, is very humble at the moment. You have where you have a deck down where it's mainly growing weeds. You have a Victory Field sign, and you have a gate further down on Orchard Street, about 50 feet from that entrance that isn't really used. If you look down here, you have I think it's about 50 or 60 feet from this driveway. There's a gate over here.
Yeah.
And it doesn't lead,
It just leads it to the-
anywhere. So I guess what I'd be asking Glenn is if we could have it could be utilized by the kids.
A drop-off area?
Drop-off area, and then they could go directly down to the track. It would be just an extension through here. You have a Victory Field sign, you have a Paul Bartley rock. We could do a little bit better for that, gentlemen. A little better if you think about it as a space where people could go.
So that would,
just to explore it.
okay, that would be a bus drop-off here?
Bus drop-off on Orchard Street. And then those kids could offload and go down to the car. But you have other people. You have this gate that's not utilized. At least I've never seen anybody going through that gate.
People tend to come down Bradford, across there.
Really?
And that's sort of the natural.
Over here, there's no path once you get.
Well, I know, you walk on the ground.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
but let me, I'm sorry, and then on Marion Street, you have that beat-up ramp that nobody uses, that's deteriorating. And you have people going along that ramp, and then you have some space. And in addition, if we think about all this driveway, you have edges that are not utilized.
Right.
In some places, it's 10 feet. On the other side, from the field house to the driveway, in some places, it's like 3 feet. Wherever the cyclone fence ends, you have spaces. Sometimes it's 3 feet over here, I'm sorry, about 2 feet. On the other side, you have another, it varies. And I think whatever we do in the design, those edges you want to deal with those edges. And you have some space that's not being utilized. Now, could that be, I don't know that, I really don't know in this area where you have the arc, that would be sufficient for pedestrian. But at least we could, I don't know if we can explore it, but I suspect it's not enough. But if we should deal with those edges and not just leave them for greens and other uses.
Okay, Peter.
Just for clarification, Elliot, no disrespect, but the police are very adamant, they don't want drop-off on the Orchard Street with a bus. If you have and that's when we start running toward Orchard Street, because the bus is high and wide, and that takes up too much of a space, and the cars try to go around it, and they cross the median street. So if you talk to the police, they don't want that to happen. The other thing with the telephone pole is, as Steve alluded to, there's power underneath that pole. In terms of the sidewalk, again, I love the 2014 plan. The one thing that I didn't like about the phase one is they fenced in the cannon. I think, if you take down that fence, you might be able to create a little room there to create a little bit more walking room there. I didn't like the fence because I think I wanted the handicapped veterans to be able to go up there. But other than that, it's kind of tight, like Glenn said. Hopefully we could, this elevated situation, that could be another impact of maybe you could have an entryway somewhere. But I think the road is very tight, as Glenn said. But I would say I'm concerned when people start talking about the bus, and you could check with the chief, but that's the recommendation.
Whether or not it's used for bus drop-off, I don't know about it, but it strikes me it's a better it's a way for people to get through down there.
Yeah.
And I don't understand, I thought I saw some buses dropping people off.
They do, they're supposed to.
It would be better in the DPW lot, but because I had a chance to earn some varsity letters, and we always had a walk. We never got a drop by the field house. That's maybe it's
You
a,
were a good athlete, that's why.
oh, it's fantastic.
Mark and then Steve, and then I think Elodie.
So I guess, just as I look at this, I think if we're driving people, not driving, metaphorically driving, literally driving, having people go to Victory and we're encouraging them to go without cars, we have to give them safe passage through Victory, right? I think it's kind of like if we're saying don't drive, walk, and then we say when you get there, you're taking your life in your hands. It's kind of like, it seems to be that we're, you know, I think it's great, frankly, and Tony, a great job. I think it's great that we have taken care of that green space, and I don't subscribe always to that act. If you're down there, you can understand, it just makes sense, the aesthetic would be good. But I do suggest, and I won't make a motion because we seem to get all worked up when we make motions, but when I look at Victory now, and maybe Steve, maybe you're up next, when we look at it. So there is a sidewalk there when you walk out the main gate. So if you walk out phase 1, you walk out and there's a sidewalk, right? The sidewalk stops after about, 25 feet this way and 5 feet this way. And so for the green space, and I get it, but there's also a piece of me that says we gotta get a foot access where you can go from Marion to Orchard.
Yeah.
You have to be able to walk through and be able to not get run over by a car doing a U-turn or a turn around or a bus idling, or there's got to be some way, because right now that for me is probably, and I cannot stand this umbrella notion of I'm doing it for the kids or for the safety of the kids. In my mind's eye, there's a lot of things that kind of fall under that umbrella comment. And so I kind of, in this situation, it's dangerous. It is dangerous when kids are riding their bikes, or people are going down in strollers, or people are, slower than others. We have to provide an access. And the question I would have is, and again, Elodie, it goes to, I'll call you the green space person, just for the sake of
Queen of the green
conversation,
space.
the queen of the green space. But there is a defined sidewalk here that, the cannon is there, and Peter had made reference to the fact of access to it. I think we've done an incredible job of fencing off. We're the kings of fences, right? Every time you turn around, there's a fence here, there's a fence here, there's a fence here. In my mind's eye, there's rationally, unless you can explain to me why we have so many fences. If we took down some of the fences and we were actually to extend that sidewalk to Orchard, right, there is space there, right, we could in some way, shape or form manufacture that. I'll defer to Glenn on kind of how we would do it. But frankly, this follows the whole way around until we get to the turnaround, right? And so I think in the spirit of Elliot's comment of, do you do it on this side? I don't really care which side you do it on. But the reality of it is, I think practically we have to look at a way that you can, if you're going to walk there, if you're going to walk with this gentleman said, if you walk with this 10-year-old and 8-year-old, and you walk in the Orchard gate, how do you get to the basketball court?
Yeah.
Like you got to have some plan of, I get on the sidewalk and I walk down, because in 2 or 3 years' time, his kids are going to be down there by themselves, and they're going to be on their bikes, and they're going to be competing with this notion of people adhering to the speed limit. They fly through there. Kids fly through there. Everybody flies through there. It's not just kids. So we do have to come up with a way of giving access from Orchard to Marion. There has got to be a way we do that.
Okay, Steve.
Okay, my turn.
There you go.
And, I'm sure that this won't immediately resonate with everyone, but hear me out. So, we've already established that we have limited right-of-way between the field and, the grandstands and the cannon and all these things. There's not enough room there for an adequate two-way road. There's not enough room there for an adequate two-way road and pedestrian access, and everyone wants to go back and forth. So, if we started where Glenn's first raised crosswalk is that didn't go anywhere, and instead, from that point back, we gave the road a different treatment. We made that a raised table. We gave it a different surface treatment and made it a mixed-use facility so that it encourages people to walk there, discourages people to drive there. Cars can still go, but they will recognize it is not a road, it's not the same place that they're supposed to be. They will go very slowly, they will be mixed in with the pedestrians. You know, it's a concept that certainly works in other parts of the world, and we've incorporated it some places in Watertown more recently, at least in the planning stage, and makes it more safe. It makes it more safe because if you're driving, you're not comfortable because you know you're not on a road. If you're pedestrian, you know there might be cars there, so you watch it, look out for them. So it becomes a mixed-use space that that functions. And so at least I think we should at least consider that. And so from that front raised walkway back, it would be a different surface treatment. It would look different. It wouldn't look like a normal road. It wouldn't act like a normal road. Would still provide vehicular access back to the few spaces we have back there and for the buses to go drop off. But it would also act as a pedestrian access.
And just so everybody knows, before I recognize the lawyer, that the town of Watertown, we adopted a complete streets policy in May 9th, I believe, of this year. And that what Steve is describing is sort of the complete streets policy where everybody has equal right to the road, pedestrians, bicyclists, cars. That being said, this isn't a road. This is parkland. This is a driveway in parkland. So, you know, but the same principles, I think, do apply. Hello, dear.
Steve and I are in total agreement. I believe that where that first crosswalk, whatever Glenn has, whether you need a raised bed or not, but it should tell you that you are entering a very different space. And we can do that by texturing the road, that roadway area, I'll call it a roadway area. We can do it by adding beautiful plantings along the way, some trees and things that are more appropriate, that slow people down. I agree with Mark. Let's get rid of some of these fences. Let's move the cannon up further, closer to Arsenal in that other pocket, which frees up more space in the green area behind the bleachers, and I've got some ideas for that as well. But I think by planting, by road texture, by some welcoming signage that alerts people to the fact that welcome and here you are in our space, and we can figure that out as well. We totally change the feeling of this area. We slow people down and they understand that it's people first. We are doing this at Arsenal Yards in that project. I don't know how many of you have attended any of those meetings, but it's being done there. It's also being done on the Athena property. And if this is being done all over Europe, it's a very Dutch concept. Hate to give credit to my countrymen, but it's smart streets, and it's the way we should go in this area. And we'll totally slow down the cars, because Mark is absolutely correct. Whether it's an adult or a kid, they fly through there. I had to grab somebody the other day because people pay no attention to pedestrians. And the idea is you want to alert any driver, this is a pedestrian area, because I want kids to be free to move around that area between the fields as much as possible.
I find this a little contradictory. We just went through the whole idea of keeping 23 parking spaces. We just went through the idea of a circle for vehicles. We just finished up the issue on the buses going through. And now we're saying that we want to design the pavement in that area so that we actually discourage people from going there, from using the 23 parking spaces. It just seems like that's not, we started a discussion about sidewalks, and now we're talking about changing the whole area where we just finished making some major decisions. So it seems like we made those decisions, we should stick to those decisions, and we should allow people to use the parking that we decided to keep, and make it so that people can drive down there and they can circle around and come out. I'm not interested. It doesn't seem to me to be practical to change the area in such a way that you're discouraging people from using it.
So if I could,
Steve and then Elliot.
if I could respond to that a little bit, it's not to say that cars can't go there, not to say that they shouldn't use the parking or they shouldn't go down there and turn around, or the buses either. It's to say that you're in a different place where you're sharing that facility with people. So if you're driving there, you need to go slow, you need to go careful. It's the exact issue that people describe. People go bombing through there because they perceive it as a road, even though it's a driveway. Well, if you really do some physical things that make people uncomfortable when they drive, they will drive more slowly. Not to say that they can't drive there, but that they would do so in a more careful manner so that they share the facility with pedestrians.
Okay, Elliot.
I think we're talking about a couple of things and it's sort of hard in a committee to design, to talk about how to deal with a space like this. But one thing that we are doing, that we're trying to increase the amount of usage of this facility with little kids, with folks, let's call them a bad knee, bad back set. They can't really move up that well. Some of them can. I can't. Anyway, we're talking about a tremendous amount of, we're trying to get an increase of usage. That means people on foot, people on cars. Now maybe, and you also have in this space, a lot of cars are going to be backing up. It's going to be perpendicular. And whether you have that little thing in your car where it shows the back, it doesn't show the right or the left. Backing up, if there's a little kid back there, you ain't going to see him. Which isn't to say what you're saying is wrong, but I think it's hard to verbally, I would like to see a little bit more of a, like, mark, some area that little kids and less nimble folks maybe can feel comfortable making their way from one space to another. Now maybe that street can be, with texture, with a variety of things, be made totally safe. But I think that's a design, it's a serious, I think, significant issue to try to design. And perhaps one of the things to do is to ask, we have a landscape architect here, and that's his area. Is it the existing, what's showing on the now adequate? I don't think so. I think we have to do a little bit more, or at least I don't know the design details. I don't know what's involved in texture and all the stuff that's being talked about. But I think it has to be straight, from what I can see, and I don't have full knowledge, it has to be strengthened, it seems to me.
So let me, if I could just recap some of this discussion. So going back to the map. What we're talking about right now is sort of the area from the end of the front parking area, this driveway up to sort of the back parking area. So that's what we're calling, we agreed we're going to call that the driveway, not Marion Road. We heard from Glenn that we're really constrained in terms of the width of this thing. It's not quite wide enough. If 20 feet is just wide enough to fit two cars past each other if they're going very slowly. It's really kind of complicated to build in a sidewalk along here. So taking what Steve has proposed, sort of this, turning this into sort of a shared space, a shared driveway space. I would say, if anybody ever goes down there, it currently is today. Everybody just rides their bike down the middle of it, walks down the middle of it, pushes a stroller down the middle of it, and sometimes they pay attention to the cars, sometimes they don't. So pedestrians are currently doing that today. Now we could figure out a way to to fit in, as Mark had mentioned, fit in some sidewalks in here somewhere. How many people here have teenage children? How many people think that those teenagers are going to actually use the sidewalk? We could put these raised table crosswalks. How many people actually think are actually going to walk from here to here using those crosswalks? People are just going to do what they want. And part of the reason is, I believe, is this isn't a road, this is a park. And people feel that as a park, they have a right to walk wherever they want. And I guess as a committee, we have a fork in the road. Do we want to try to turn this driveway into a road and impose strict pedestrian motor vehicle separation? Pedestrians have to stay on the sidewalk, and motor vehicles, can use the rest of the 20-foot wide roadway? Or do we want to say, no, let's keep the way its current usage is, which is pedestrians basically own the space and cars would be careful driving around. So what do we want to do as a committee? What kind of recommendation? In my mind, those are two significant paths. And I think what Steve has proposed is by changing the treatment of this driveway, making it all sort of red brick colored or something, maybe doing some signage. So when cars come in off Orchard Street through this front parking area, once they get to this point, they're aware that they're in a different space and that the cars no longer have the right of way. This is not a Marion Road for cars primarily, pedestrians have to go somewhere else. But this is in fact a place where pedestrians have the right of way.
Pedestrians always have right of way.
But cars better go slowly around them. Basically 5 miles an hour, and if somebody is walking in front of you, you have to just go behind them. That's pretty much how it's being used today informally. So I guess the question of this committee, do we want to formalize that usage, or do we want to go take the other fork in the road and say, no, let's try to enforce a strict separation? And my concern is we could physically build a strict separation, but I don't think anybody's going to use it, and then we will have failed as a committee to recommend something that nobody wants to use. So anyway, I'll just throw that out there. I'm very intrigued by it. I'm honestly, that is, since we've been talking about complete streets at the town council, this is something I've really been thinking of a lot, and I'm actually very intrigued by it. So I forget who had the hand up first. Elliot, I think, did, and then Elodia.
I think you're setting a false dichotomy here. What can I say? I think I don't disagree with trying to set up a street that where all cars, people can function, but I have no sense of what the detail is. And to be didactic about it, there's I remember that there's an architect, famous guy, who said, the architectural god is in the details. I think landscaping is the same thing, and I don't have a clue I don't have sufficient knowledge, of what the detail is going to be so that we have the safety of folks using it, and cars, again, it isn't just people moving from Orchard Street to Marion Street. You have cars backing up. You have people with different levels of agility. So perhaps this street can be designed that way. I just don't know what the details are and how we're dealing, again, to repeat, you got some edges there that are not utilized. And whether you use them for a sidewalk, I don't know. But they're not utilized properly. They're just weeds. They vary from, again, to repeat what I said before, some places they're 5 feet, some places they're 2 feet, and they're on both sides of the road. In any case, the bottom line for me is that I don't think it's these two dichotomies, these two options. One of them, it seems to me, how do you flesh out the option if it's a street or a driveway? And I think we have, I would like to see more detail. What else can I say? I don't know what we're dealing with on texture, on speed bumps, on whatever it might be, that wanted to, so that that increase of folks who are going to be using it are safe.
Fair point. Okay,
Number one, Elliot, I want to go back to your idea of getting some access in at that corner, because that does take some pedestrians off the walkway I think that's a really good idea, having some gate over there. But as a person who lives on Marion Road and watches all the high school kids go by, and there's only one sidewalk on one side of the street, none in front of mine, I wish we could do this on my street. Because I will tell you honestly, the kids are all over the street. They do not walk on that little bitty sidewalk. They walk in a gang, in groups and gangs, and they're having a great time as they walk to that field. And we have the same issue. It's even, you could say, more dangerous because people do know that Marion Road is a road and they come bombing up the street. But the kids are just spread out. So anything we could do to slow down traffic on my side of the road would be a great idea. But I think it'd be great if people could go to some of the other development meetings going on in town with regard to Arsenal Yards, etc. Because this is going to happen there, and I think it's the right way to go, and I totally agree with Steve on this one. And I think by proper landscaping, it slows people down. They don't perceive it as this speedway area that they have, and by the texturing and proper signage and maybe even kind of a stop sign where you begin to enter in that narrow way to identify to people that you're going into a different space, I think this can be accomplished.
Mark, and then Steve.
This Leonard could do a combo, would be pretty good, he can answer my questions.
It's teamwork.
So I guess just one thing, pedestrians don't have the right of way. So if you can't just step out in the middle of traffic and cars stop and you're in the right. So I think, we have to be careful. You have to be.
In this state you can.
You can.
In this state you can.
We want to check it. So before we make a broad statement that if we do this, the pedestrian has the right of way, I just want to make sure, because depending on what reference material you look at, you can't step into the middle of Mount Auburn Street and claim right of way into oncoming traffic, just in the spirit of what we're doing. But we can just check that, just to make sure, because I'm with Tony, right? I think, when we look at what we've done and what we're trying to do here, there's only a finite amount of things that we can do in the space, and the idea that you're going to take people who have just driven from, in the spirit of Wilmington, who've just driven from Wilmington, come down either 93 or 95 or how you get doing 75 down, and then all of a sudden your driving behaviors are going to change because you see a sign, and you're going to avoid the stroller, you're going to avoid the kid on the bike, you're going to avoid whoever because the bricks are a different color, or it's, we're in this space, it just isn't practical, right? I've spent a lot of time down there, and I know it works in different countries because I think driving behaviors are different, to be completely honest. Here you can drive at 16, in Ireland it's 18, and most of Europe it's 18. Big difference, right? A lot of those kids, and I think what we're doing is we're pinning a lot of this teen behavior on, why we don't have a sidewalk. If we have a vote here and we say we're not going to have a sidewalk from front to back, I'll vote no, right? I think, at this point in this day and age, if you're going to have people come to Victory, if you're going to have people want to partake and want to bring their kids, want to bring their strollers, forget about the teens for a minute, you're going to have to provide a place for them to walk, and walking isn't in the walkway here. Like if you go down there on any Saturday morning, you'll see kids. We're asking people to make a decision. It's kind of a game of chicken, right? You either have kids that will, or people that will walk to one side. You've provided, 30% of what we have here is sidewalk, and then you don't provide a way to get from one sidewalk to the other, right? And I'm not sure I fully understand, Steve, and maybe it's good you're coming up next, is that when we look at the space behind the bleachers, right? So this space, if you turn on from Orchard, there's kind of a platform, a concrete platform there before the ticket office. Then there's the parking spots, and then behind that, quite clearly on this, there's a grass verge. I don't understand why we couldn't continue that down to the front gate and continue that around to the turnaround.
There's a drop off, it drops off a hill right at that fence line. That's one of the problems there.
Well, you could put in a small retaining wall and you could put a sidewalk in. Like at this point, this is going to cost, because we're probably in a fairly significant chunk of change here anyway with, some of the things that we're proposing, right? But, the notion of putting in a sidewalk, it's just, I don't get how we think people are going to change their behaviors and not drive, right? Like, there's things that we talk about nets and we talk about whatever. ultimately now we've gotten to an idea where we're gonna put in a, you know, a parking lot, we're gonna ask people to share the road, cars, buses, strollers, bicycles, pedestrians. You know, we're worried about nets, forget about the nets. You know, you're gonna have people that are gonna be, you know, hey, I stop, I'm walking here, I'm doing whatever. It has to be very defined.
So, I think part of the reason that people have real trouble with the concept is because, at least in this country, we've done a very good job of separating. And we've said, this is where the cars go, and this is where the pedestrians go. This is where the bus goes, and this is where the, you know, and we, you know, I think a lot of places, a lot of cases, a lot of situations, that's, you know, served us well and been useful. But I think it's created the difficulty with people understanding a concept of a shared space. So, and today, we've created this as it's a car space. It's not a pedestrian space at all. There's nothing that says you should walk there. There's no sidewalk, there's no change in any texture, there's no signage, there's no nothing. Yet, people walk there. So, I think today we have an unsafe situation in that it is a car facility, it is a road, and people are using it, you know, as pedestrians. So what I'm proposing is we change that, make it a mixed-use facility where it is not designed for the cars exclusively, where it is clear if you are driving there that you're entering a different space. And if I come there from Wilmington and I come off of Orchard Street and I see this nice asphalt area with parking spaces and a drive aisle, and I get to this space where there's a raised table, there's a different texture, there's signage that says, you know, pedestrians have the right of way, you know, this is a pedestrian area, and there are people walking, and there's people with strollers, I'm not gonna go barreling through there. I'm gonna slow down and wait for that stroller to move out of my way, or vice versa, wait till it makes its way. So I think it's a very different concept, and, you know, having one of my first trips to Europe and going to a place where there were these shared facilities, where there is restaurants with tables sitting out with people eating and drinking and cars and trucks going by, I said, oh my God, this is gonna work. These poor people are gonna run over. You know, somebody having a drink's gonna fall out in front of a car and they're gonna get killed, or, you know, a vehicle's gonna veer over and run over a couple of tables of each. It doesn't happen. It does not happen. And it's because people understand that it's a shared space. And vehicles are very careful about how you travel in a shared space with pedestrians. So I think it's worth a try. I think it makes sense and would give us an opportunity to fit in this space what we want to accomplish. But I certainly understand some of that trepidation and wanting to continue to separate facilities.
Okay. Peter and Mike haven't weighed in. Do you guys want to?
I'll let Lori, you go first.
Okay.
Got her hand up.
Okay.
Just continue with what Steve's doing. If we move that cannon up closer to the front in that other green area, and we put a historical plaque, because people say, what's that cannon all about? That also becomes a visual lock as someone's moving in to say, oh, I'm in a different place, there's a cannon here, what the devil is that about? It stops you. And then we go change that texture. I think there are things that we could do that could really make this work, but I'm very familiar with what Steve's talking about, and it's a totally different environment. And again, it's a change, and we have to educate people about that change. But I truly do believe it can work.
Okay, Mike.
I'm not too familiar with the surface area, so I'm just concerned with safety. I mean, maybe it'll be an education process to put it in. Maybe we'll have to do a lot of work. Right now, I'm just concerned with how it works, and I'm not too satisfied with the area as it is currently. Seeing how people drive, how people walk, the mixing, trying to people leave games, it's just, I don't know, we gotta do some homework on this one.
Peter, did you?
Usually I'm pretty opinionated on something. I like the feel of what Steve's saying, and I can't feel, although, no disrespect, that poor cannon has been moved a long time. That German cannon has told me it doesn't want to move anymore. I think taking down the fence would be really nice. I think I think everybody's getting nervous. What Steve's saying is just put a different texture, raise it up, and I think it's helped, because although, and everybody be surprised, with Mark, I like sidewalks too, you know, I hear, but there's just not enough room, you know? And so you gotta pick the balances. I'll say again, we're making this decision in a vacuum without talking about this elevator that never worked. So that's a whole different space. So I don't know what I'm trying to say, other than I think giving a try to what Steve is saying is really not gonna negatively impact anything, and it might be a plus, because I don't think there's room for sidewalks. I see what Mark's saying about that. Elodie, I generally don't agree with you. I agree with you on sometimes, but the cannon needs to stay. And if anything, I would take the fence down, because I think it takes away from accessibility and the niceness on there. Huh?
So it looks like an animal in a zoo.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, so I think, and that might create a little bit more space to do whatever. You know, give a little bit more, because that's the tight area. The tight area is between those two raised areas. So I think wherever you could open it up is better. Not saying, Councilor Picciarelli, that I'm trying to get along with everybody now, that they're gonna walk that way, but if you have another 3 feet, it might help. It might help. But I think given that area, again, I'm nervous, Steve, I know you went to Europe, but, and not to get negative, but, you know, with all these other things that they're blockading places because unfortunately trucks are going through, I get nervous on that too. Not that that's gonna happen, and that's very sad. I know that's off the pot, but that's a little off. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and can I just, Glenn, you're a landscape architect, you've certainly done many
I
parks.
think it's a fantastic idea.
Okay.
And
So
I think there's a lot of elements that can be added beyond the textured pavements, vegetation.
Gravel.
There's a lot of things. I think it's a
Lighting,
very good idea.
vegetation.
So I guess, so let me just hold on. So, you know, this used to be Marion Road. And that's why this telephone pole is on the side of it, because it used to be a public street, and it's no longer a public street. And we've never, you know, we've discontinued it as a public way, and now it's parkland, but we've never changed the treatment of it so that when you drive on it, it still looks like a street. You know, that's the problem. So the challenge would be to you as a landscape architect is so when people, you know, as Mark mentioned, like people drive down Route 93 from Wilmington, they come here to a game, the park. When they pull into the parking lot, it's like, well, I'm not driving down the street to a parking area. I've now pulled off Orchard Street and I'm in the middle of a park.
Correct.
So the challenge, the design challenge to you is how do you do the treatment of this driveway to make it not look like a street, to make it look like part of the interior of the park? I would agree with Elliot about, you know, removing the utility poles. And I know we didn't do that in phase 1, but we don't have any other park in Watertown where we have utility poles running right through the middle of the park. And I think at this point we need to maybe bite the bullet and just remove them. Because the wires that are on those poles only serve the town-owned equipment in the field. It's not, doesn't go through to Marion Road and serve anything else. Those wires come in off Orchard Street, all they do is power the equipment in Victory Field. So it's certainly, if, and I would just point out, we hold developers, if a developer builds a project, they buy an existing project that has utility poles and overhead wires, we make them remove the poles and put all the utilities underground. So, and I would just say, if we hold private developers to that standard, why would we as a town not want to hold ourselves to at least that same standard? And I understand there's a cost to that, but there's a cost. You know, and we've gotten costs from Instar and Verizon, that was like $10,000 to move a pole, but, you know, it's cost is a cost. You know, everything has a cost. But I think, I understand this is something new that we haven't considered, and I'm wondering, so we have two things. We could decide to do this, decide to do something else, or maybe would it make more sense to say, you know, to the point that Elliot raised, come up with some ideas, maybe ask Glenn, or maybe even the planning or DPW to give us some more details about what perhaps this would look like, so that the committee would know sort of what they're recommending, because I do sense a little bit of apprehension from people that this is a new concept. But I do think, you know, Lodia mentioned that if you've gone to the Athena Health or the Arsenal Yards projects, this is what they're proposing to do. This is exactly what they're proposing to, shared roadways for pedestrians and motor vehicles. And the motor vehicles are allowed to drive through the park, but they have to take, they have to give way to pedestrians who are using that space. We're not talking a huge parking area, we're talking 23 parking spots. And certainly, everybody who goes down there, it understands that as I'm going down this driveway, it's like, oh, there are people walking here, I need to take care of the people who are also sharing the space. So I'm throwing that out there to the committee. I'll open up to the public to see what they have to say. I'm gonna start with Susan.
You don't have to go to Europe. All you have to do is go to Mount Auburn Cemetery and either walk or drive. Either way, you're perfectly comfortable and safe. So, right down the road, the biggest open space in Watertown, even though most people think it's in Cambridge, it's mostly in Watertown. So that's one thing. Is it possible to change the name of what is on the drawings here as Marion Road to something like Victory Field Path or Victory Path, something that changes the name so that it's on people's Google, eventually on people's Google Maps.
Donahue Way. Donahue Way.
Well, just so everybody knows, if you go on Google Map, it no longer says Marion Road.
Oh, it doesn't?
Well, we discontinued it. If you look at our traffic rules and orders, it's been discontinued as a public way. So.
That helps if it's not considered a road or a way or the path or something. Why is there no signage there now, 5 miles an hour?
Well, we can do that. This is a part of the, once we get to sort of
Because that seems,
an operational
that
issue.
would start the changing of the concept and make it safer the day the sign goes up. I mean, I'm not saying everybody pays attention, but anyway, those are my thoughts.
Who else had their hand up? David and then Steve.
I love this idea, Mr. Magoon. I think your experience in Europe is I'm wondering what studies have been done in the United States to give us a sense of whether this is a sort of historical cultural phenomena or whether it's something that's malleable human behavior. And Europe has a much different history around cars. And I think one thing I would suggest to the committee is to have a sense of how this has worked in other communities and what the risks are that are involved. But as a concept, I think it's wonderful. And when I said pedestrians always have the right of way, I overspoke, but I think in this space, clearly, pedestrians always have right of way.
Okay, Steve Kennedy.
I just wanted to comment. I actually think you might want to combine a little bit that even with your idea, which I will admit I do not fully understand, I think Elliot's point of saying you still want some kind of pedestrian access from Orchard Street to at least that first place where you change is a good one. That they're really, I mean, this is a place where when I walk, if traffic is going on, it gets really, really kind of tricky. So I think that some kind of pedestrian thing, particularly the track, would be really useful to think about.
Anybody else from the public? Okay, Susan?
The only thing I had seen, and I think a lot of you have gone to Spalding, in front of the hospital there, there's a lovely park there, but they use that, like I mentioned before, that blue surfacing, the olive surfacing, and the beige surfacing. The beige surfacing that's rubberized is where you do walk, and that could be done, and there's trees inserted in that surfacing. So along that whole Victory Field area that's well, it's not Marion Road anymore, that could be done beautifully there with that type of rubberized surfacing. It's not actually, it's sidewalks, but it's a walkway, but it's not actually concrete. So it's lovely, and trees can be put in there.
Yeah.
Right along a beautiful edge, it'd be gorgeous there, but there are no trees there now. No shade for anybody.
Okay, last question, David.
Sorry,
and then
really quick question, and perhaps the landscape designer can help us think this through. I'm wondering what ADA requirements are on resurfacing a piece of land like this that would perhaps make it less accessible. connected.
Well, I'll ask that question. So the work
Yeah.
we're doing will require the entire facility to be
Of
fully
course.
ADA
Yeah, yeah.
accessible. So,
None of the surfacing that we're talking about would still be, you know,
Okay.
accessible
Okay.
surface.
okay, Tony, and I think Steve has.
I'm just not convinced that, first off, I have nothing against caging cannons, or cannons we caged, but
We captured this from Germany.
cage it too. So I wouldn't mind moving the cannon if we can get some, is there a possibility that we can get a walkway there, or is that elevator blocking it?
To be honest.
The elevator's not
There's so
moving.
much going on in there.
Yeah.
I think if we had been able to put a sidewalk in under phase one, we would have connected that up. Like I said earlier, the one problem is we had that huge fence and that drop off, so we weren't gonna tear all that fence out, put a sidewalk and build a wall under phase one.
But we could do that on the phase two.
Could put the money into improving right along the parking.
Right.
Gets you over the elevator.
It does get you over the elevator.
Yeah. But you would need a retaining wall, you need to take that fence out, you need to put a sidewalk in, it's doable.
But, well, I think that makes sense if we're talking about trying to get people to be able to walk from Orchard Street to Marion Road. I would think that we need to take those steps in order to get that sidewalk there, it seems to me. On the resurfacing, I don't mind if we want to make it feel like people should slow down, but I'm not sure that's going to make a difference. People who are driving to get their kids over here or to get to the field house to drop people off, they're still going to drive. And they're still going to use those 23 parking spaces if they're going to go play tennis, or if they're going to go play basketball, or they're just going to sit around some of that green space that we think we're going to, we want to put benches and so forth. So I'm just not convinced it makes a difference to people's behavior. So I just hold my
Steve?
thought on it.
So just a couple things. One, in terms of data and studies for use in the US, it's been widely used in the US, a lot of places right around here where you can find examples where this concept has been utilized. And I think the biggest or the most convincing statistic for me is a lot of studies that would suggest, if you put up a 5-mile-an-hour speed limit sign, generally people ignore that. The things that make people actually drive slower is physical changes, things that make them feel uncomfortable going fast. So if a road has a lot of turns, you're not going to go 80 miles an hour because you physically can't. If you have a facility that has a raised table that gets you up and you feel it's a different facility, it's not a road, it's not someplace I can go zoom down, then you drive slower. If there's pedestrians around, you drive slower because you physically are not comfortable going faster. And as a result, when there are accidents, where accidents do happen, because you're going a much slower rate of speed, they're much less serious accidents. People don't die, people aren't seriously injured, they're very minor in nature because people are going more slowly. So, I can certainly get a lot of the, background stuff to support that if you like, give some examples of where it's been used other places, work with Glenn and do that, and give you a better sense of what it is if you like that.
Okay, so so it's, despite our best intentions to be done by 9, it's now 9:45. I'm wondering, would the committee feel more comfortable with asking Glenn and Steve and other staff to come back to the committee with some more information about what this concept would potentially look like before we make a decision? Or would that?
I'm comfortable with making a decision, but I'm very familiar with this, so.
Yeah, I'd be interested in more.
Yeah.
I would like to see more detail, not only in the middle area, but from Marion Road to the middle area, how we're dealing with that section, the middle area, and just more detail. Again, I don't know what we're, I've been in Europe a lot too, in different cultures.
Me too, Elliot.
I've been on, usually they're boring.
So let me just sort
So
of.
take a trip together, we
Yeah,
can experience this.
Just more detail.
So I guess what Elliot's asking for is, okay, that gets us from, that concept gets us from here to here, but how do you get from Orchard Street to that area, or how do you get from Marion Road through this area? Because the pedestrian access is, I would say, a little bit less than optimal. So could we, our next meeting is not until September 19th. Is that enough time for Steve working with Glenn to sort of pull something together, some sketches? It doesn't need to be a full-blown design, but just some sketches about.
Now that we know kind of what we're looking at for turnaround and parking, and that helps, so we could do a sketch and get some pictures of some of these examples.
And yeah, examples of, you know, and Palmer Street and Harvard Square is another example. If you go between the two Coop stores, you know, that's a shared roadway. And so if anybody ever has been to Harvard Square and see that, that works very well. There's loading docks and there's people playing guitars, and it's seems to be, you know, the conflicts between motor vehicles and pedestrians seems to not exist there.
Can we also have Glenn look at the sidewalk idea of moving the cannon and putting the retaining wall in and getting us from Orchard Street down through into Marion Road? Some kind of sidewalk starts there and ends up in Marion.
Okay, so we could do that, just options. Peter?
I would like to really, it's not that I'm frustrated that we're talking about moving a cannon after 5 years we're moving it. It's not that I'm in love with the cannon, it's just, we continue to try to make decisions piecemeal and in a vacuum. And it just really is not in the best interest of the residents. I'm a resident paying taxes. And I think we need to look at it. Let's, you know, is there a way we could try to make a recommendation to start taking a look at phase 3? And does that make, you know, once they come to November, does that make more sense? I know it's not this committee's charge, but I would hate to all of a sudden do this, move the cannon, do this, and then 5 years from now, well, we're gonna build phase 3 and now we're gonna move the cannon back to where it was. So I'm just saying, it's just, I just think when you're building something here, the town dropped the ball. We should have built the whole thing together 5 years ago. I know financially we probably couldn't do that, but now I just want to put that phase 3, we should be talking about it if we're going to start making these decisions and undo what we did in phase 1. That's all.
Well, the phase 3, we have a placeholder for it. You know, we can't do building construction under state law with the same project as a landscape project. So those are two separate things, because they're covered under two different chapters of state law, and there's two different bidding requirements for buildings and for landscaping and roads. So we actually, even if we were to design it, you know, we couldn't do it at the same time. So, but I will point out that we have a placeholder for the expansion of the field house. And what we're going to design, or what we're going to recommend for phase 2 is going to be, take that into account and be consistent with whatever we're going to do for the renovation of the field house. So that's, yeah, but the amount of space that the renovated field house is going to take is the amount of space it's going to take. So, you know, we are constrained by space. But, so in terms of making decisions, you know, we need to make a decision on phase 2 so we can proceed with this, while at the same time holding a placeholder for the work to be done in phase 3.
And thank you. I guess the thing I'm concerned about, which impacts the decisions on this road, is the elevator and the press box.
Well, the elevator is not part of phase 3, so that's irrelevant. And the elevator, no, the elevator is not part of phase 3. The elevator, the repair of the elevator, you know, was a recommendation of the Budget and Fiscal Oversight Committee to actually spend the $60,000 to fix the elevator. They put it in upside down, so instead of going up 2 floors, it goes down 2 floors. No, I'm only kidding, that's just, in the precedence here, that's just a joke. They had to
Charlie, did you get that?
they had the plan upside down when they built it. No, there are some mechanical and electrical problems with it. But even if we spend the money to fix the elevator, it's not gonna change the location of the elevator. Because the press box is at the top of the stand. So fixing the elevator and renovating and expanding the field house are two separate projects. So, but anyway, we need to break the decision down into small chunks. But I'm really concerned about when we make our final recommendation, all the pieces do fit together. So we will have a chance to come back and revisit all our individual decisions to make sure that they all fit together from one cohesive, comprehensive design. So I'm gonna, so that'll be our action item for the next meeting, to ask Glenn and Steve to look at those two options, one with the sort of the complete streets version, and then a second one, as Tony requested, of looking at, what it would take to put a sidewalk from Winch Street down to Marion Road, and how we could possibly achieve that, if it is in fact achievable. So is the committee, are we unanimous in making that request for an action item?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. Question, do we have the ability to go out on, as part of this, to see that whole area and what's being done? I mean, I'm looking at the map right now, I'm thinking of the cannon, the walkway between the cannon and the ticket booth, the school board, all those things. It's,
yeah.
I mean,
Well, certainly everybody could go there. We might, let's wait until we get some sketches back, and then maybe after we get some sketches back, we'll do another site inspection, and we can walk through with the new plans and see how all the pieces fit together. And Peter, I understand your pain. I sort of wish all these design decisions on phase 2 were done when we designed phase 1. It would have made things a lot easier, but it is what it is. We just need to deal with it and move on. But certainly, whatever we recommend is to be compatible with phase 1 as well as with phase 2. And that's my goal. So that being said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor?
Aye.